Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump accusing Iran of playing games while saying they do want a deal. It comes as the administration says the ceasefire is not yet over, the latest in the Middle East. War Secretary Pete Hegseth says Iran does not control the Strait of Hormuz, announcing a new U.S. operation to protect commercial shipping as tensions continue despite a ceasefire in place. A key decision expected today on the detention of the suspect accused of attempting to assassinate President Trump. This as a federal judge orders a review of his jail conditions after he was placed on suicide watch. Voters heading to the polls across Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan, where key primaries and a closely watched special election could shift the balance of power. Elon Musk settling a lawsuit with the SEC, agreeing to pay a $1.5 million fine over delays in disclosing his Twitter stock purchases. President Trump's drug pricing deal is expected to save the U.S. economy hundreds of billions of dollars, the latest estimate from White House economists.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for joining us. President Trump says Iran wants to make a deal but is playing games. It comes as the Pentagon says a ceasefire is not over despite fresh Iranian attacks. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Iris, good afternoon. What is the latest?
Good afternoon as well, Don. So the Trump administration is now saying that a ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran is still in place. And it comes after the U.S. and Iran on Monday traded fire in the Strait of Hormuz after the U.S. started to help guide commercial vessels through that key waterway by really creating a defense umbrella, as the Pentagon calls it, to help these ships that have been stuck there get out of it. Meanwhile, Central Command announcing that Iran has attacked U.S. commercial as well as Navy vessels using cruise missiles, and the U.S. in response destroyed 8 Iranian fast boats. And President Trump this afternoon saying that Iran knows what to do and what not to do, and also saying that the latest attacks by Iran small boats shows that their military capabilities have been largely diminished. Watch.
What do they need to do to violate the ceasefire?
Well, you'll find out, because I'll let you know. You know, they fired them in little boats with pea shooters. You know, the pea shooters, little boat with little, you know why? Because they don't have any boats anymore. The Navy is comprised of, they call them little boats, fast right? Boats or little boats. And they're fast, yeah. They're so fast that, that they had 8 of them and they're all gone.
The UAE says that it's now under attack from Iran on a second day in a row, and that hasn't happened since the ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran started about a month ago. Now it's drawing condemnation from Gulf countries in that region. Pentagon also announcing that since a ceasefire started, Iran has fired at commercial vessels at least 9 times, seized 2 container ships, and also attacked U.S. forces more than 10 times. That said, all of them are considered below the threshold that would require the commander-in-chief to declare the ceasefire over and resume major attacks. General Kane this morning calling them low-level kinetics. The president this afternoon saying that Iran does still want to make a deal, but is playing games by acting differently in public versus in private. He also continues to call this conflict a skirmish by the U.S. Watch.
You know, we hit an all-time high stock market today, despite that we're in a little skirmish military. I call it a skirmish because Iran has no chance. They never did. They know it. They express it to me when I talk to them. Then they get on television. They say how well they're doing. And they have no Navy, totally wiped out. They have no Air Force, totally wiped out.
And of course, the president has been emphasizing that this conflict is very much needed to make sure that Iran, who he called a lunatic regime, does not have a nuclear weapon. He has been saying how close Iran really got to almost getting a nuclear weapon given its enriched uranium and its nuclear ambitions. And he said that in order to prevent that from happening and to make sure that the whole region, if not the whole world, stays safe, he had to make the call to go in and make sure that Iran's nuclear ambitions are thwarted. Meanwhile, today, the president is saying that if Iran still wouldn't make a deal, they won't be successful, and quote, it will go very quickly and methodically. So again, the president refreshing his threats for major strikes if a deal is still not accomplished. On the economy, though, President Trump says Iran is facing skyrocketing inflation, and he does want Iran's financial system to fail in order for the U.S. to win. This afternoon, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will be briefing reporters at the White House, while Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, is on maternity leave, and that will be the secretary's first major formal press briefing in months. Back to you.
Okay, Iris, thank you for the updates. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth today with an update on the situation in Iran, discussing Project Freedom, the U.S. effort to secure the Strait of Hormuz. Hegseth says the operation is separate and distinct from Operation Epic Fury.
Project Freedom is defensive in nature, focused in scope, and temporary in duration, with one mission: protecting innocent commercial shipping from Iranian aggression. American forces won't need to enter Iranian waters or airspace. It's not necessary. We're not looking for a fight, but Iran also cannot be allowed to block innocent countries and their goods from an international waterway. Iran is the clear aggressor, harassing civilian vessels, threatening mariners from every nation indiscriminately, and weaponizing a critical choke point for its own financial benefit, or at least trying to. For too long, Iran has been harassing ships, shooting at civilian tankers from all nations, and trying to impose a tolling system. Iran's plan, a form of international extortion, is unacceptable. That ends with Project Freedom.
Hegseth says Iran does not control the strait, mentioning that 2 U.S. commercial ships, along with American destroyers, have already safely transited the waterway, a fact he called embarrassing for Iran. The secretary says hundreds more ships from nations around the world are lining up to transit, and that Central Command is in active communication with shipping companies as well, and insurers. Meanwhile, he says the blockade of Iranian ports is in full effect, calling it humanitarian.
Ceasefire is not over. Ultimately, this is a separate and distinct project, and we expected there would be some churn at the beginning, which happened. And we said we would defend aggressively, and we absolutely have. Iran knows that. And ultimately, the president's going to make a decision whether anything were to escalate into a violation of a ceasefire. But certainly we would urge Iran to be prudent in the actions that they take to keep that underneath this threshold.
Meanwhile, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Dan Kane says Iran has fired at commercial vessels 9 times and seized 2 container ships since the announcement of the ceasefire. Kane says Iran has also attacked U.S. forces more than 10 times, which he says is all below the threshold of restarting major combat operations.
As a result of Iran's indiscriminate attacks across the region, there are currently 22,500 mariners embarked on more than 1,550 commercial vessels trapped in the Arabian Gulf, unable to transit. In addition to shipping, Iran has continued to deliberately attack its neighbors. Just yesterday, Iran attacked Oman once and the UAE 3 times, including an attack on Fujairah oil terminal, which was successfully defeated. They also launched cruise missiles, drones, small boats at U.S. forces defending commercial shipping in the Straits, and United States Navy MH-60 helicopters and Army AH-64 Apache helicopters successfully defeated those threats. Thus far, today is quieter.
Kane says CENTCOM has established an enhanced security area on the southern side of the strait. He says it's now protected by U.S. naval and air assets to defeat any Iranian aggression against commercial shipping. Meanwhile, Secretary Hegseth says the U.S. expects the world to step up at the appropriate time. He says the U.S. is in contact with the South Korean ship hit by Iran. On that topic, South Korea today saying it's evaluating whether to join U.S. efforts to guide ships through the Strait of Hormuz. And staying in the Middle East, the United Arab Emirates says it's responding to new Iranian missile and drone attacks. This follows similar attacks from Iran yesterday. The UAE's defense ministry confirms that its air defense systems is actively engaging Iranian missiles and drones. Iran has not confirmed or denied the attacks. The UAE yesterday engaged 15 Iranian missiles and 4 drones. Local authorities say that one drone sparked a fire at a key oil facility, wounding 3 Indian nationals. The British military reported 2 cargo vessels were ablaze off the coast of the UAE. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth saying the U.S.-Iran ceasefire is holding, and he says Project Freedom is a separate measure from Operation Epic Fury. Joining us now to discuss is Andrew Harding, Senior Associate for National Security Coalitions at the Heritage Foundation, and we also have Jacob Olidor, Director of the Center for American Security at the America First Policy Institute. So first of all, thank you so much both for coming on the show today. And if I may, Jacob, I'll start with you. Do you believe that this effort by the U.S. to keep commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz will restore confidence in transiting the strait to the level before the war started?
Well, it's great to be with you. Look, it absolutely will, and I think it's the first step towards a new chapter for this waterway. As we know, this has been under attack by the Iranian regime for 47 years, and there have been periods, including during the Iran-Iraq War, where Iran has stopped commercial traffic altogether through this waterway. And so Operation Epic Fury, although that's not the main objective of the operation, one downstream effect, one ancillary effect, is that it'll make this part of the world much more stable and secure, both because Iran will be far less capable of enacting on its agenda, as well as the confidence it's instilled in our partners in the region.
Okay, Andrew, let me go to you now. What are your comments on this new operation, Project Freedom?
Well, I think this is an excellent step by President Trump and keeping an emphasis on having the Strait of Hormuz open for business. I think Iran has continued to demonstrate that it wants to hold the strait at risk. It understands that it has a piece of leverage there, but President Trump is flipping the script. He's ensured that with the blockade, the United States Navy has full control over Iranian ports, and clearly Operation Epic Fury has been so successful to the point that the Iranians aren't able to break a naval blockade on its own waterways. But furthermore, by having this more defensive operation with Project Freedom, this allows the United States to ensure the flow of oil can continue in the Strait of Hormuz to help countries get through that strait without the threat of the Iranian missile strikes. But Iran showing that they're still going to do whatever they can to try to keep pressure on the strait. So I think it's good to hear that the United States acted decisively in response to the Iranian threat here, and that while maybe the ceasefire is still holding and we haven't seen escalation that could break the ceasefire, it's good that the president and the United States military is holding firm on ensuring that those countries around the world that want to get their oil out of the strait have this new opportunity.
Okay, so Andrew, Jacob, sorry. Jacob, Andrew brought up the idea of control. So let me ask you this. With the blockade and U.S. guiding commercial ships, how much control does the U.S. have over the Strait of Hormuz right now?
Well, it's full control. As Andrew mentioned, it's flipping the script on the Iranians. And for the first time, certainly in generations, we have the United States holding all the cards, as the president would say, controlling the traffic in this waterway. Now, of course, it remains a vulnerable time right now as the operation is ongoing. But I think right now we are, the United States, through the power of the strongest Navy in the world, is ensuring the safe passage of commercial ships that have nothing to do, that are just kind of bystanders, to ensure their safe passage out of this waterway. And so I think this is fully the United States, for the first time in its history, really dominating and creating the conditions on the ground for safe passage of maritime traffic there.
So, Jacob, you say earlier that this is flipping the script on the Iranians. Does Iran have the military capability right now? Because it has warned that it's going to target U.S. forces, and it has. Does it have any military capability to back up this threat to any meaningful degree?
It has still some capabilities based on its own domestic production of weapons, but don't forget, they are in a profound state of political and military chaos as far as leadership that has disappeared, an unprecedented situation which they don't have a functioning Ayatollah to call the shots of where and how to escalate. And so, however it is they have the capabilities to escalate, their ability to do so, to meaningfully act on an agenda, is significantly curtailed given the successes of Operation Epic Fury.
Okay, Andrew, same question to you. What is the state of Iran's military right now? Does it have any power to actually meaningfully back up any threat it makes?
Well, I think Iran can still hold the strait at risk, not necessarily overwhelm, but the fact that you could still fire off some missiles or have some attack boats is going to be enough to spook some different ships and vessels that are going to be multi-million or billion-dollar vessels with oil or other resources that want to get out of the strait. And Iran knows this. They're trying to weaponize this. But again, and as Jacob has also reaffirmed here, is that President Trump is having all the cards here and showing that while Iran may be able to try to threaten the strait, they certainly do not control it. And importantly, the key metric I'm looking at here is Iran is not able to break the American naval blockade of its ports. Iran is losing north of $400 million a day by having its oil terminal ceased to where they can't get oil out of the strait. They're having to cease production. They can't store more oil. And that's really hitting not only the broader economy of Iran, but is directly hitting the IRGC, the exact units that would be trying to conduct military operations. So yes, Iran will do everything it can to try to keep its leverage here. But as this operation goes on and as the blockade holds, every single day that continues, the United States gains more leverage.
So, Andrew, the United States can essentially keep Operation Epic Fury going as long as it wants to. How long can the Iranian regime sustain this war?
Realistically, we're thinking of perhaps a few weeks, and that's because of the economic factor here of if you're losing hundreds of millions of dollars a day, you're not going to be able to sustain a country. We know that Iran, roughly 80% of its exports go through the Strait of Hormuz. Now that about 90% of that is oil alone. Karg Island, of course, handles almost 90% of the oil flowing through Iran and going through the strait. So the United States can prevent ships from coming out there. That significantly degrades one of Iran's primary avenues of revenue, which accounts for roughly 25% of the total GDP for the country. So that alone is going to put Iran in a very difficult position. So what we're seeing here is, while we're still seeing the blockade hold, Project Freedom, Iran trying to fire missiles at vessels here, ultimately both sides are aiming to maximize their leverage wherever possible and see, when it comes to different diplomatic agreements, to see who's going to have the most leverage and can get what they want on paper. I think the United States, the longer this goes on, they can maintain it. The United States can replenish, have the stockpiles necessary to continue to fight. And as long as this goes on, eventually the money and the tap is going to run dry for the Iranian economy here.
So, Jacob, do you see more eagerness coming from the Iranian side in terms of wanting to end this war? Because Iran's latest proposal to the United States apparently seeks to end the war in 30 days. This is according to Iranian state-linked media.
Well, there are probably some that do want this to end quickly, and that's, I think, one of the fundamental pieces of all of this that has gone missing in the media coverage, and that is the important role that the negotiations themselves play, independent of the actual deal itself, in exposing the vulnerabilities, the lack of coordination and communication among different elements within Iran's military and political leadership. And so when we receive a statement, part of what we look at as far as the proposal from the Iranian side is not just what's in it, but on whose behalf it represents, it speaks. And so I think that, again, further erodes their hold on power, their ability to coordinate attacks against us and our partners, and of course, generally reinforces the efforts of Epic Fury and now Project Freedom to bring kind of safe passage and safe conditions on the ground for the people of the region, and particularly the ships now flowing through that waterway.
So, Andrew, a similar question. Since the beginning of the war till now, do you see any difference at all in terms of how Iran is responding to a U.S. request for an agreement? Has there been any change? Do you feel Iran is more willing to come to the table now than before, or no?
I think they have been. I think that's because, as Special Envoy Witkoff noted, when they first were starting or having some diplomatic conversations in Switzerland in February, the Iranian negotiators came up and said that they can enrich potentially around a dozen, enrich enough uranium for about a dozen nuclear weapons if it so chose to within a few days or weeks. That has significantly changed, and Operation Epic Fury has forced Iran to come to the table. With the conventional success of the operation, Iran can no longer hide behind a conventional shield, a porcupine of different missiles or drones, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been excellent in articulating that that's important to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. That, on one hand, if diplomacy can work and it's in America's interest to pursue a meaningful deal, then the president's going to pursue it. But if not, he's not just going to take a deal for the sake of a deal. And so we're seeing President Trump here authorize Operation Epic Fury, have the blockade, and prevent Iran from being able to hide behind missiles and have a nuclear weapon, and ultimately become the North Korea of the Middle East. So I think we're seeing this two-pronged approach that ensures that Iran has changed its tune and is more willing to negotiate. But until then, the president's right to ensure that all gas continues should there be some type of military operation to come if Iran doesn't really work at the table.
So, Jacob, Andrew talks about this two-pronged approach. How much pressure is Operation Epic Fury putting on the regime, and how much is Economic Fury putting on the regime? How much pressure, including the U.S. blockade of their ports?
Well, they're both mutually reinforcing, and I've written on this that they're part of the same strategy. There is an economic strategy and, of course, a military one, and you really can't have one without the other. And in this case, specifically the military power, I think achieves two objectives. The first is actually destroying the capabilities themselves. The second is the diplomatic function of building our leverage over Iran in the negotiations. And that's what we're seeing time and again. Really, if you look back to Operation Midnight Hammer last summer, that has been this process all along of bringing Iran to the table through both tools. And so, yes, I think the special envoy and his team now again engaging with the backing, the full backing of the U.S. military power behind them on the heels of all the successes we've had to date. I think that reinforces our hand in the negotiation and our ability to bring Iran to the table and get them to a deal ultimately.
Okay, so Andrew, President Trump has said this, that potentially the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz has been more effective than the bombings on Iran. I'm wondering if you have an opinion on this, whether the blockade is more effective or the bombings were more effective.
Well, I think to Jacob's point, they really reinforce each other, and that you have to have this combined strategy in order to achieve this political goal of preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And so Operation Epic Fury, the military angle here, was able to degrade Iran's conventional capabilities, in which they don't have a navy. Their air force has been severely depleted. They have very few air defenses that have minimal successes, in which the United States and Israel can conduct any operations necessary to prevent Iran from getting that nuclear weapon with the conventional arms. But on the economic front, this is hitting the regime right out of its wallet-book. If it thinks that it's able to export oil on its own terms through the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. Navy has demonstrated that's not going to happen. And so while Iran is conventionally damaged and can't really offer a full retaliatory response, again, they cannot break a blockade that's on their own ports. But now by not being able to do that, ensures the United States can really put a lot of pressure on Iran's economic situation. So therefore, that can lead towards a better U.S. negotiating position on the table. The fact that Vice President Vance went to Pakistan a few weeks ago does show that there must be some interest, some belief that a deal is possible, at least in theory. But until then, the U.S. is going to keep the pressure going until a deal is presented to the president that is finally on America's terms, that it can commit to and enforce, and not allow Iran to get away with anything.
All right, just one more question for each of you. Jacob, General Dan Kane said today that Iran is grasping at straws. Your assessment on what is the current state of the Iranian regime?
With every passing week, I think the Iranian regime is getting more and more desperate, more and more chaotic, and is losing its grip on the command and control, on the ability to act on its agenda, and potentially on its hold on power as we knew it prior to this operation. So the general is exactly right, and I think all of this is leading toward a situation that was really outlined in the president's remarks on February 28th in describing the focus of Operation Epic Fury to make the American people once and for all protected and safe from the threats from this regime. I think we've far and beyond accomplished that objective.
And Andrew, finally, what is your assessment of the Iranian regime?
Well, I think Jacob hits it right on the head. And the only thing I'd add is that it remains in Iran's best interest to come to the table and work with President Trump. President Trump has made very clear that he is willing to pursue a deal. He prefers peace. He's conducting Operation Epic Fury out of the necessity to protect the American people and put the American people first. But if Iran's willing to come to the table, he is willing to hear them out and negotiate in good faith. But of course, Iran's going to have to work with President Trump on the necessary and correct political objective of preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. If Iran delays, then we'll continue to see these pressure tactics and operations continue. But if they're willing to come to the table and really remove that ambition to become the North Korea of the Middle East, perhaps we can see an agreement that is in America's interest that the president seeks to have.
Okay, very good. Well said. Pleasure to speak with the both of you. Andrew, Jacob, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And voters heading to the polls across Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan, where key primaries and a closely watched special election could shift the balance of power. More news after this break. Stay tuned.
According to ancient Chinese medicine, purslane is considered a medicinal herb and is used to help lower cholesterol, improve vascular functions, and prevent diabetes. Perilla seeds can nourish the lungs and spleen. It is used to treat asthma and improve pulmonary functions. Puritang green vegetable omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds from Hwangmae Mountain in South Korea. It contains over 90% of omega-3, 6, 7, and 9, the highest concentration possible without chemical additives. The soft gel is made of natural seaweed. It is 100% organic and vegan. Both adults and children can take it with peace of mind. Ancient recipes were passed down from heaven to bring prosperity and longevity. Puritang green vegetable omega-3.
Today's seniors are enjoying life more than ever before, and part of that comes from the independence of driving.
However, car insurance for older drivers becomes more expensive the older we get.
Just because I'm a senior, and maybe you are too, do we really have to pay outrageously high insurance rates? Well, the answer is no, we don't.
When was the last time you checked to make sure you're paying the lowest available rate? Well, maybe it's time to give your car insurance a tune-up, just to make sure your rates are running properly.
You change your oil, you change your tires, well, maybe it's time to change your car's insurance company.
Are you paying too much for your auto insurance? If so, you're just throwing your money away.
So the only way to really know if you're paying too much is to call the number on your screen.
1-800-952-5196. 1-800-952-5196.
You'll speak with a licensed insurance agent. They may have an insurance plan that could lower your yearly premiums by hundreds of dollars.
Seniors can save money on their car insurance.
So call right now and find out just how much money you might be able to save.
Come on, call now.
You may be able to save a lot of money, maybe hundreds of dollars a year. Just call the number on your screen and speak with a licensed insurance agent.
Yes, it is possible for seniors to save on car insurance. You could lower your premiums by hundreds of dollars a year.
As a responsible driver, you always check your gauges, right? And you check for other cars and pedestrians. You check your oil and you check your mirrors.
Well, now is the time to check on your auto insurance rates. You need to make sure that you're not paying more than you need to. Call the number on your screen right now.
1-800-952-5196. 1-800-952-5196.
Voters are heading to the polls today in Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan with key primary races and one closely watched special election underway. Ohio is holding elections for governor, Congress, and other offices. For governor, the Republican candidates are Vivek Ramaswamy and automotive entrepreneur Casey Puch. Democrats are led by former health director Amy Acton. Indiana is seeing competitive congressional primaries. The races are drawing attention after Senate state Republicans declined mid-decade redistricting despite calls from President Trump. In Michigan, a special state Senate election could shift the balance of power, with Democrats holding a narrow majority. The outcome could determine whether Republicans gain enough seats to force a tie and block legislation in the chamber. Vice President J.D. Vance is visiting Des Moines today in his first trip to the state since taking office, and an early test of support among key Republican voters. Vance is campaigning with Congressman Zach Nunn, who faces a competitive race in the upcoming midterms. The visit comes as Iowa prepares to play its traditional early role in the 2028 presidential race. Vance is seen as a potential contender, though he has not announced a run. The vice president will also visit Cincinnati, Ohio to vote, and Oklahoma City, Oklahoma to hold a fundraiser for the RNC. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro is calling out a judge for his apology to the man accused of trying to assassinate President Trump. The suspect in the assassination attempt is expected to receive a final decision on the terms of his detention today. Prosecutors say Cole Allen shot a Secret Service agent in an attempted attack during the White House Correspondents' Dinner. A judge yesterday raised concerns over Allen's treatment in custody, saying his conditions must be reassessed, and also apologized to the suspect. Allen was initially placed on suicide watch and is being held in a so-called safe cell. Officials say the measures relate to suicide risk protocols following his arrest. His charges include attempted assassination of the president, discharging a firearm during a crime of violence, and illegally transporting guns and ammunition across state lines. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro criticized the judge on social media over his apology, saying, quote, he believes a defendant armed to the teeth and attempting to assassinate the president is entitled to preferential treatment in his confinement compared to every other defendant. The Justice Department is suing Denver over what it argues is an unconstitutional weapons bias. The complaint centers around a city ordinance banning so-called assault weapons. Denver's law includes a prohibition on AR-15s, the most popular rifle in the United States. The DOJ argues the ordinance infringes on the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche weighed in, saying, quote, the Constitution is not a suggestion and the Second Amendment is not a second-class right. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon of the DOJ Civil Rights Division said her office would defend the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding Americans. Dillon added that American citizens should be able to exercise those rights, regardless of where they live. The White House is rolling out a new national strategy aimed at cracking down on illegal drugs and cartel activity. Drug czar Sarah Carter said the administration will work to stop the flow of drugs into the U.S. at all points of entry.
Our strategy outlines a detailed plan to accomplish this, beginning with a continued effort to expand the detection of illicit drugs through the use of technology. We will continue to enhance border security through the Department of War, making it incredibly difficult for cartels to smuggle deadly chemicals into our neighborhoods. This strategy outlines a plan to dismantle online drug trafficking, including virtual drug markets and payment mechanisms. We will also collaborate with social media platforms to pursue new policies that will protect innocent children, our children, from fake pills being sold on these platforms.
The strategy calls for a more aggressive approach, stepping up pressure on cartels and trafficking networks. It expands coordination with international partners to, quote, relentlessly pursue and dismantle drug trafficking networks wherever they operate. The plan also includes boosting prevention, treatment, and recovery efforts nationwide. The White House says it wants to create a drug-free America as a social norm. A Texas doctor has been convicted of running a pill mill. Prosecutors say Dr. Barbara Marino illegally distributed more than 1 million opioid pills out of her clinic in the Houston area. Authorities say the prescriptions had no legitimate medical purpose. The jury found Marino guilty of 5 counts relating to distributing a controlled substance. She now faces up to 20 years in prison per count. And a New York lawmaker is turning his focus to hidden fees in food and grocery delivery apps, looking to ban surveillance pricing. NTD's Sean Marshall has more on this.
U.S. Representative Dan Goldman of New York believes consumers should know all about the hidden cost up front before checkout when using food and grocery delivery apps. He's introduced the Promoting Real-Time Information on Cost Expenditure Bill, or PRICE Act legislation.
I think the PRICE Act does a few good things, which is that it requires that I don't need to go to the final step to see what the full price is, right? And this is something similar in other industries. Concert tickets is one that comes to mind, right? There's been a lot of outcry about why is my concert ticket like double the price by the time I get to the point where I have to put my credit card in. I think where this PRICE Act really falls short is that it doesn't cap the fees. So if delivery apps are still able to charge you double the price or triple the price and still able to add on like 5 or 6 fees in the line item pricing, then that doesn't really help consumers or Americans who are looking to use these apps. So I think really there should be a cap on the number of fees or on the percentage of fees that these platforms are allowed to charge you.
Representative Goldman wants to ban these apps from engaging in exploitative surveillance pricing. His bill says these practices harm consumers by making it virtually impossible to comparison shop and by hindering competitive markets.
Surveillance pricing is something that Americans should definitely be concerned about for a variety of reasons. It ultimately really gives the platforms a lot of power because, like you mentioned, they have access to where you are, what you buy. They can put you into a demographic box if they think that you can pay more, not just because you have more purchasing power, but because you may be in a situation where you're categorized as a desperate user.
Hidden fees don't only affect the consumers, they can also have effects on the food businesses in the apps.
So there can be a distrust between that where users feel like restaurants are upcharging the food pricing, and sometimes the pricing upcharge is, double the price. It can be 30% higher, 50% higher. Sometimes it's a pretty substantial increase. Ultimately, the restaurants are the ones who are often still losing out. Restaurants are still barely meeting their margin requirements, and restaurants are already operating on quite thin margins in the United States.
The Price Act requires delivery apps to show consumers the total running all-in price of their order as items are added to their carts. It also requires that the apps include, prior to checkout, a clear breakdown that prominently displays the ongoing total purchase amount, along with an explanation of each fee. The bill additionally bans food delivery apps from engaging in surveillance pricing, an exploitative pricing strategy where companies use personal data, including location, browsing history, device type, and shopping habits, to set individualized prices. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
The White House says President Trump's drug pricing policy could save the economy billions of dollars. This is according to their economic report today. The Trump administration has struck deals with 17 leading drug makers under the Most Favored Nation framework. The White House Council of Economic Advisors estimating today that the deals could save the U.S. $529 billion in the next 10 years across all markets. They say this would include saving federal and state governments a combined $64 billion on Medicaid. The report also says GLP-1 weight loss drug users without insurance are expected to save $3,000 per year, and couples undergoing in vitro fertilization can save $6,000 a year. According to the latest government data, Americans spent $467 billion on prescription drugs in 2024. The Trump administration says it's working to reach more agreements with drug makers and also asking Congress to codify these deals into law. China is experiencing a historic surge in buying silver. Imports surged to an 8-year high. What is the reason for this? We talked to an analyst after this break. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Ryan Blaney, a third-generation race car driver, and we dedicate a lot of our time to going as fast as possible. My grandpa Lou is the reason why my dad and I started racing, and I'm really proud to follow in his tracks. But when my grandpa was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was a very unexpected bump in the road for us. I've learned a lot on this journey with my grandpa Lou, and the memories of my grandpa will always be with me. And in our family, we're used to getting involved, and I encourage you to do the same, especially when it comes to caring for your loved ones. When I think about Alzheimer's and the impact it had on my family, I recognize that losing a race isn't such a bad day after all. It's important to notice if older family members are acting differently, experiencing problems with their memory, or having trouble with routine tasks. Talking about Alzheimer's can be really tough, but if you notice something, have a conversation with your loved one. Encourage them to see a doctor or offer to go with them. Early detection of Alzheimer's can give your family time to explore support services, make a plan for the future, and access available treatments. If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together.
Being a cowboy, I don't know anything different from when I was 3 or 4 years old. I did tough things. I thought everybody needed to do tough things, and if you didn't, I didn't have time for it. I had a very successful career at a very young age, and life was fast. I was preparing physically. I wasn't doing anything mentally on the inside. And then I got hurt. I wanted to be better as a person, and I really dug into mental health. I start my day with 20-minute workouts. I live life 8 seconds at a time. Horses are so therapeutic. They know what you're feeling. When you're nervous, they're nervous. You won't say it back, but we're pals. I take a lot of responsibility in taking care of my kids, my family, and being there for them. You're gonna have tough days. Everybody does. Find a place to stop and just breathe. Love your mind.
We said we'd never give in to a meltdown.
Okay.
And we'd never babysit with a screen. We said we'd never let the toys take over.
Mariella!
Never leave the house looking, well, and never let them out of our sight. Skylar, come here. Cars get hot fast, and kids can be at risk. Before you leave the car, always stop, look, lock.
China is experiencing a historic surge in buying silver. Imports surged to a multi-year high. Joining us now to talk about this is James Anderson, Senior Precious Metals Analyst at SD Bullion. So James, good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here today. So the question is, how much silver is China buying and why is it important?
So in March, just about a month ago, they bought over 800 tons in 1 month. That's generally 2 to 3 times the regular flow. So it kind of tripped off people in my industry to understand why this is happening. In the beginning of the year, people have been watching the silver price. They saw silver run over $120. It's since receded, falling down, to 75 roughly today in spot price. So it's been a pretty big drawdown. There's been a few things that have happened. At the beginning of the year, they've kind of clamped down on the amount of people who can export silver out of the country. So some of the smaller exporters, they don't really export as much silver as now. And so you see a clamp down on the flows out and a much larger amount of buying in. So it's showing you that I think they're concerned because silver is essential to them for all the manufacturing they do in terms of, they're number one in terms of cars and solar panels, et cetera. And I think the Iranian situation, too, is also boosting the amount of people throughout Southeast Asia, Europe as well, who are planning on buying more solar. So I think there's a combination of things going on there, and China's starting to scramble for more silver.
Okay, so what is the significance here? Why does it matter? It
matters because you're living in a world now that's running on a just-in-time basis for silver. So we're going to have a situation in the coming years where you're going to have problems with the amount of supply that's available. So that run from silver running from, say, $60 to $120 that happened at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, it's not over. There's going to eventually become another rolling squeeze on the silver price. You'll see silver run to multiple hundreds of dollars per ounce in the next 2-3 years. I'm not saying it's imminent. It could happen at the end of this year, but it will happen in the next few years. You're running into a situation where there's deficits in the supply and there's much more demand than there is supply.
So when we say China's buying silver, who are we talking about specifically? Is it the government? Is it companies, investors?
It's mostly the manufacturing side. The investing side is growing there because China, they do buy gold generally, culturally. That's usually what they buy. They also have a VAT tax of plus 13% because they see silver as mostly an industrial input. But there's an growing investment amount of people buying silver. I think they bought around 20 million ounces last year in investment silver. And as gold gets more unaffordium, much more expensive, and silver starts to outperform gold, you're going to see them switch to a lot of silver. And they don't care about the 13% VAT. You'll see a mania on the silver side in China as well.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit more about the impact of this record silver buying? And are there any supply chain impacts or concerns about this much buying?
So the major silver supply places where you find silver in the world is generally London. And COMEX, there's warehouses throughout the East Coast here in the United States, and then Shanghai. Shanghai has gotten down in the last 10 years or so to the lowest levels they were at in the mid-2010s. So they've been buying is because the combination of their warehouses are very low, and London's are historically at very low levels, and the COMEXs are falling back down toward low levels. So the combination of all three areas, you're seeing drawdowns. And so even the Silver Institute itself says you're probably looking at a situation where the silver price will be stout for the rest of the year, but we are looking at a future where the price volatility will be high and mostly upside because of these factors.
Okay, so talking about the future, how long is this buying spree going to last? Is this like a short-term thing?
Yeah. The demand factors for silver is the reason why silver is so important is because it's so important for all the electric things that we use, right? In terms of AI, even in terms of solar panels, in terms of electrification, electric vehicles. Virtually anything in the studio has to have silver in its guts. And so if we want to continue to build out and digitize the world, you're going to need a lot more silver. If you're talking about robotics, virtually anything that's cutting edge has to have silver because you have to have electric conductivity at the fastest, best rate. And silver is just, it's a must have.
Okay, how sensitive is the market right now to China buying silver?
It's not. I mean, right now what you're seeing is people probably looking at the market thinking, it went from 120 down to 75. And they probably don't understand the fundamentals that are underlying this. And so what you saw recently was more of a momentum trade that really ran in, hot money ran in, drew silver very high quickly, and now it's receded. But underneath the fundamental factors are very, very good, both industrially and eventually store of value-wise, I mean, in terms of investment play. So you have a situation right now where the hot money's probably gone off to oil or to what have you, other things that are Iran-related. But it'll come back at some point. That's just inevitable. Gold and silver are in a bull market, and this is probably going to be a rolling type of thing that you'll see in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Okay, so to put simply, essentially, you're very bullish on silver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm very bullish. I'm not telling you tomorrow the price is going to double, but I'm telling you within the next few years it will.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, do you think silver is a better investment right now in terms of value or gold?
So that's a hard question. When someone asks me that, I always ask them what their interest is. Is it first and foremost to preserve what you own? Then you should own some gold because it's not as volatile. If secondly you want to have it actually enhance what you own and actually buy more, I'd tell you need to have some silver. Right now, like the S&P 500 costs about 100 ounces of silver for the nominal S&P. If history repeats, it'll go to 20 ounces of silver probably by the end of this decade. So you have an ability, if you hold silver bullion over the stock in the S&P 500, to basically enhance your buying power by 5 times. That's basically the type of swing trade I'm talking about, like a 4-year play where you own bullion now and you trade it when it gets to about 20 ounces for the nominal S&P 500.
Okay, last question here. Physical gold or silver better, or paper silver and gold?
It's physical because you're living in a world where the return of your capital is more important than the return on capital. I mean, you look out in the future, there could be a lot of failure. So you want to make sure you actually own what you have. You don't want to have anybody in between what you own. There's a lot of problems, I think, that will come in the future for people who think they don't think that the counterparty risks. So having it in your possession and or in a non-bank account like a Brinks, a Loomis, that's the way to do it. That's the safest way.
Well, all right. Terrific insight today, James. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Okay, now let's take a break. We'll have more news after this. Stay tuned and don't go away.
Kids love it. Parents trust it.
Obviously.
Explore GJW Plus Kids Series and Ganjiang Campus courses led by expert educators.
This is spectacular.
Children will learn values like respect, responsibility, and knowledge in language, science, and more.
Wow.
All while having fun.
Perfect.
Subscribe today at GJW Plus Kids, where learning meets fun.
Provide hot meals, safe shelter, medical care, and love to more than 2,000 young people who sleep at a Covenant House every night. Homeless young people are afraid and alone. Your monthly donation right now will show them they are loved and safe.
I have no words to express how Covenant House changed my life.
Call or go online now and give just $19 a month. We'll send you this comforting blanket as a reminder of the difference you're making in a young person's life. Call or go online now to safeplacetosleep.org.
I tell my son, I love you every single day. Now, my dad has never said that to me. Not because he doesn't love me, but because culturally it wasn't comfortable for him. Now that he's a grandfather, he says, I love you to my son every time he sees him. My advice to all the fathers out there, forget the cultural restrictions. They grow up way too fast for you to waste even a single precious moment.
President Trump signed a proclamation today reinstating the Presidential Fitness Test Award. The president hosted children and professional athletes in the Oval Office.
From the late 1950s until 2013, grade schoolers across the country competed against each other in the presidential fitness test with others. And then we had the Obama administration. Wonderful, wonderful person, Barack Hussein Obama. Have you heard of him? We had the Obama administration, which phased out this wonderful tradition of physical fitness. Thank you, Barack, very much. Great job. And we're bringing it back. We're bringing it back. My administration's working very hard to defend America's cherished athletic traditions and pass our values of excellence and competitiveness to the next generation.
Thank you to the President of the United States for helping reestablish this presidential fitness test. It's been something that we've been looking forward to doing for a long time. Since 2013, I remember going through the presidential fitness test as a kid and getting that award, and it was quite an honor. So being up here and a part of that is quite instrumental and going to be amazing for our nation's future. Reestablishing the golden standard of the presidential fitness test has been a huge deal for me. Is that these kids now are going to have a healthy future. That's really an important thing for us to note here. Is that we want to make sure our kids have the best opportunity to succeed in life, and not only from their mind, but their health and their well-being. Their physical fitness is a huge priority to helping them become better human beings in general for our nation.
President Dwight Eisenhower created the President's Council on Youth Fitness in 1956 amid a decline in youth fitness in the United States. In 1966, President Lyndon Johnson established the Presidential Physical Fitness Test, granted to youth athletes who demonstrate exceptional achievement. The restored focus on physical fitness comes amid the Trump administration's Make America Healthy Again agenda led by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Artificial intelligence firm Anthropic announced it's launching new tools that can speed up a host of tasks for banks, insurers, and other segments of the financial services industry. The startup launched 10 financially focused agents or AI programs that can perform tasks with limited human intervention. Anthropic says these include agents that can build a pitch book, audit statements, and draft credit memos. The company also announcing new data sources that its so-called Claude AI can access to do financial work. Anthropic CEO Dario Amodel also has a stark forecast for software disruption. Amodei says its Claude Mythos model has probably found tens of thousands of vulnerabilities across industries so far, and that there should be legislation or rules to govern the release of powerful AI models. Elon Musk agreeing to pay the Securities and Exchange Commission over his purchase of Twitter as he settles a civil lawsuit. Here are the details.
Elon Musk has settled the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission lawsuit against him for a $1.5 million fine. The suit accuses the world's richest person of waiting too long in 2022 to disclose his initial purchases of shares in Twitter, now known as X. Under the settlement disclosed Monday, a trust in Musk's name will pay the fine. The Tesla chief did not admit wrongdoing and won't have to give up any of the $150 million he allegedly saved from the delay. Now, the settlement requires approval by U.S. District Judge Sparkle Suknanen, who in February rejected Musk's bid to dismiss the case. The SEC declined to comment. In its lawsuit, the regulator said Musk's 11-day delay in revealing his initial 5% Twitter stake let him buy more than $500 million of shares at artificially low prices before he finally revealed a 9.2% stake. Musk called the delay inadvertent and accused the SEC of violating his free speech rights by targeting him. The case is separate from a civil suit where a San Francisco jury in March held Musk liable for having defrauded Twitter shareholders after announcing the buyout.
Now, an update on the suspected hantavirus outbreak aboard a cruise ship. The CDC says the virus usually spreads when people inhale particles from the droppings of rodents, but the World Health Organization says some human-to-human transmission could have played a part in recent cases. It says the virus is rare. There are no specific drugs to treat the disease, so treatment focuses on supportive care. That can include putting patients on ventilators in severe cases. Hantavirus can begin with flu-like symptoms such as fatigue and fever 1 to 8 weeks after exposure. The WHO says 3 people have died after the suspected outbreak on the cruise ship. 2 hantaviruses are confirmed. with at least 5 suspected cases being investigated, according to the WHO. The cruise ship was traveling from Argentina to Cape Verde. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is set to step behind the White House podium today, filling in for Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, who is on maternity leave. Rubio will take the lectern in the James Brady briefing room, making him one of the highest-ranking officials to lead a White House press briefing in recent history. Leavitt began her maternity leave recently, with several senior administration officials rotating in to handle briefing duties in her absence. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche says new court evidence would support the government's claim that former FBI Director James Comey's post was a criminal threat against President Trump. We discussed the case with the former CIA officer after this break. Stay tuned.
A performance that truly matters for each and every one of us. This is what you've been waiting for. See it at least once in your lifetime. Shen Yun. Get tickets now at shenyun.com. According to ancient Chinese medicine, purslane is considered a medicinal herb and is used to help lower cholesterol, improve vascular functions, and prevent diabetes. Perilla seeds can nourish the lungs and spleen. It is used to treat asthma and improve pulmonary functions. Puritang green vegetable omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds from Hwangmae Mountain in South Korea. It contains over 90% of omega-3, 6, 7, and 9, the highest concentration possible without chemical additives. The soft gel is made of natural seaweed. It is 100% organic and vegan. Both adults and children can take it with peace of mind. Ancient recipes were passed down from heaven to bring prosperity and longevity. Puritang green vegetable omega-3.
If you need to do something to feel okay to drive, you're not okay to drive. Don't drive buzzed.
It's finally here, our second annual mega sale. This sale only comes around once a year, so take advantage of the best offers ever while you can. For example, save 50% on our Giza Dream bed sheets, as low as $29.98. And for the first time ever on TV, MyPillow mattresses and MyPillow mattress toppers, as low as $99.98. And you save 50% on our Lux Pure 6-piece towel sets. Regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And our best-selling standard MyPillows, regular $49.98, on sale for $17.98. Wait on it, mega sale, only $14.98. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our second annual mega sale. But wait, there's more. To make the mega sale even more special, when you order right now, your order's going to ship absolutely free.
Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump accusing Iran of playing games while saying they do want a deal. It comes as the administration says the ceasefire is not over yet, the latest in the Middle East. The U.S. continues to project freedom in the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, what the Pentagon now says about the new military operation. Voters heading to the polls across Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan, where key primaries and a closely watched special election could shift the balance of power. President Trump's drug pricing deals expected to save the U.S. economy hundreds of billions of dollars, the latest estimate from White House economists. A New York State representative is not happy about hidden fees on food delivery apps. He's introduced a bill to make pricing transparent before checkout and get rid of surveillance pricing. Shin Yun is set to return to Toronto this June after multiple performances were canceled over bomb threats, now deemed as hoaxes.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for joining us. President Trump says Iran wants to make a deal but is playing games. It comes as the Pentagon says a ceasefire is not over despite fresh Iranian attacks. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has the latest.
The Trump administration is now saying that a ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran is still in place, and it comes after the U.S. and Iran on Monday traded fire in the Strait of Hormuz after the U.S. started to help guide commercial vessels through that key waterway by really creating a defense umbrella, as the Pentagon calls it, to help these ships that have been stuck there get out of it. Meanwhile, Central Command announcing that Iran has attacked U.S. commercial as well as Navy vessels using cruise missiles, and the U.S. in response destroyed 8 Iranian fast boats. And President Trump this afternoon saying that Iran knows what to do and what not to do, and also saying that the latest attacks by Iran small boats shows that their military capabilities have been largely diminished. Watch.
What do they need to do to violate the ceasefire?
Well, you'll find out, because I'll let you know. You know, they fired them in little boats with pea shooters, the pea shooters, little boat with little, you know why? Because they don't have any boats anymore. The Navy is comprised of, they call them little boats, fast right? Boats or little boats. And they're fast, yeah. They're so fast that they had 8 of them and they're all gone.
UAE says that it's now under attack from Iran on a second day in a row, and that hasn't happened since the ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran started about a month ago. Now it's drawing condemnation from Gulf countries in that region. Pentagon also announcing that since the ceasefire started, Iran has fired at commercial vessels at least 9 times, seized 2 container ships, and also attacked U.S. forces more than 10 times. That said, all of them are considered below the threshold that would require the commander-in-chief to declare the ceasefire over and resume major attacks. General Kane this morning calling them low-level kinetics. The president this afternoon saying that Iran does still want to make a deal, but is playing games by acting differently in public versus in private. He also continues to call this conflict a skirmish by the U.S. Watch.
We hit an all-time high stock market today, despite that we're in a little skirmish military. I call it a skirmish because Iran has no chance. They never did. They know it. They express it to me when I talk to them. Then they get on television. They say how well they're doing. And they have no Navy, totally wiped out. They have no Air Force, totally wiped out.
And of course, the president has been emphasizing that this conflict is very much needed to make sure that Iran, who he called a lunatic regime, does not have a nuclear weapon. He has been saying how close Iran really got to almost getting a nuclear weapon given its enriched uranium and its nuclear ambitions. And he said that in order to prevent that from happening and to make sure that the whole region, if not the whole world, stays safe, he had to make the call to go in and make sure that Iran's nuclear ambitions are thwarted. Meanwhile, today, the president is saying that if Iran still wouldn't make a deal, they won't be successful, and quote, it will go very quickly and methodically. So again, the president refreshing his threats for major strikes if a deal is still not accomplished. On the economy, though, President Trump says Iran is facing skyrocketing inflation, and he does want Iran's financial system to fail in order for the U.S. to win. This afternoon, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will be briefing reporters at the White House, while Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, is on maternity leave, and that will be the secretary's first major formal press briefing in months. Back to you.
Secretary of War Pete Hegseth today with an update on the situation in Iran, discussing Project Freedom, the U.S. effort to secure the Strait of Hormuz. Hegseth says the operation is separate and distinct from Operation Epic Fury.
Project Freedom is defensive in nature, focused in scope, and temporary in duration, with one mission: protecting innocent commercial shipping from Iranian aggression. American forces won't need to enter Iranian waters or airspace. It's not necessary. We're not looking for a fight, but Iran also cannot be allowed to block innocent countries and their goods from an international waterway. Iran is the clear aggressor, harassing civilian vessels, threatening mariners from every nation indiscriminately, and weaponizing a critical choke point for its own financial benefit, or at least trying to. For too long, Iran has been harassing ships, shooting at civilian tankers from all nations, and trying to impose a tolling system. Iran's plan, a form of international extortion, is unacceptable. That ends with Project Freedom.
Hegseth says Iran does not control the strait, mentioning that 2 U.S. commercial ships along with American destroyers have already safely transited the waterway, a fact he called embarrassing for Iran. The secretary says hundreds more ships from nations around the world are lining up to transit, and that Central Command is in active communication with ships, shipping companies, and insurers. Meanwhile, he says the blockade of Iranian ports is in full effect, calling it humanitarian.
Ceasefire is not over. Ultimately, this is a separate and distinct project, and we expected there would be some churn at the beginning, which happened. And we said we would defend aggressively, and we absolutely have. Iran knows that, and ultimately, the president's going to make a decision whether anything were to escalate into a violation of a ceasefire. But certainly, we would urge Iran to be prudent in the actions that they take to keep that underneath this threshold.
Meanwhile, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, says Iran has fired at commercial vessels 9 times and seized 2 container ships since the announcement of the ceasefire. Kane says Iran has also attacked U.S. forces more than 10 times, which he says is all below the threshold of restarting major combat operations.
As a result of Iran's indiscriminate attacks across the region, there are currently 22,500 mariners embarked on more than 1,550 commercial vessels trapped in the Arabian Gulf, unable to transit. In addition to shipping, Iran has continued to deliberately attack its neighbors. Just yesterday, Iran attacked Oman once and the UAE 3 times, including an attack on Fujairah oil terminal, which was successfully defeated. They also launched cruise missiles, drones, small boats at U.S. forces defending commercial shipping in the Straits, and United States Navy MH-60 helicopters and Army AH-64 Apache helicopters successfully defeated those threats. Thus far, today is quieter.
Kane says CENTCOM has established an enhanced security area on the southern side of the strait. He says it's now protected by U.S. naval and air assets to defeat any Iranian aggression against commercial shipping. Meanwhile, Secretary Hegseth says the U.S. expects the world to step up at the appropriate time. He says the U.S. is in contact with South Korea, where a ship was hit by Iran. On that topic, South Korea today saying it's evaluating whether to join U.S. efforts to guide ships through the Strait of Hormuz. And staying in the Middle East, the United Arab Emirates says it's responding to new Iranian missile and drone attacks. This follows similar attacks from Iran yesterday. The UAE's defense ministry confirms that its air defense system is actively engaging Iranian missiles and drones. Iran has not confirmed or denied the attacks. The UAE yesterday engaged 15 Iranian missiles and 4 drones. Local authorities say that 1 drone sparked a fire at a key oil facility, wounding 3 Indian nationals. The British military reported 2 cargo vessels were ablaze off the coast of the UAE. Artificial intelligence firm Anthropic announces the launch of new tools that will shake up the financial services industry. Stay with us for more on that after this quick break.
Bladder control aisle. You won't shop here again. Your private business is your own. The constant struggle is over. Now there's a better way. It's HDIS. We home deliver bladder control products. We understand how you feel. For over 25 years, we've home delivered to many of the 20 million Americans who deal with incontinence. We offer all brands. We pay shipping and use plain, unmarked boxes. If we can help you or someone you care for, call for your free product sample pack and $45 in money-saving coupons. Our counselors will help you choose the right product. And unlike stores, we're always in stock. You'll get what you need. Satisfaction guaranteed. HDIS, the better way.
For your free sample pack with your free catalog, $45 in money-saving coupons, and free product samples, call 1-800-701-6159. That's 1-800-701-6159.
Imagine a coffee that cares for your health. Expertly fermented with a 50-enzyme complex to enhance flavor and remove bitterness. Small batch roasted to a decadent medium dark, resulting in a brew that is gentle on digestion, low acid, and up to 90% less caffeine than regular coffee.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio is holding a White House press briefing amid Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt's maternity leave. Let's listen in.
Down senseless attacks on several civilian ships already. So frankly, the way to put it, these are innocent bystanders. These are countries that, and ships and so forth that have nothing to do with any of this and nonetheless are being caught in the middle of it and being held hostage merely because Iran could do that, just because of, just as the regime brutally slaughtered tens of thousands of their own citizens for the crime of peaceful protest, because they're unhappy with the quality of life or the lack of quality of life in Iran today. And so they're sitting ducks. They're isolated, they're starving, they're vulnerable, and at least 10 sailors have already died as a result of the civilian sailors. So already many nations privately and some publicly have asked the United States to help free their ships and to restore freedom of navigation in the Straits of Hormuz and this critical artery of global trade. And so President Trump, as he always does, stepped up and answered the calls for their help. And he's directed the United States military to guide these stranded ships to safety, to provide a protective bubble under which they can operate and move product and get themselves out of there and out of the harm's way. And this is the first step towards reopening the strait and bringing this regime's last-ditch act of economic arson, bringing that to a close. We're doing it not only because we were asked, but because we're the only ones who can. Only we have the power to sort of take the steps that we've taken now. Under this president, under President Trump, the United States will help our friends. We're going to stand up to rogue regimes like the one in Tehran, and we're going to be unashamed to use our power and our abilities to project military power in the service of our national interest above all else. Now, what's really important for you to report and for everyone to understand is this is not an offensive operation. This is a defensive operation. And what that means is very simple. There's no shooting unless we're shot at first. Okay? We're not attacking them. But if they're attacking us or they're attacking a ship, you need to respond to that. You're not going to let some fast boat come up on a ship and shoot it up. We're going to respond to it, and we've been successful at it. I don't know what the exact number is, but I know a number of those fast boats have now been targeted, and will continue to be if they pose a threat to our forces. We'll shoot down drones, we'll shoot down missiles, but it's defensive in nature. This is defensive. So if you hear stories about attacks and launching of firing back and forth, it's not back and forth. We are only responding if attacked first. This is a defensive operation. And that's what's occurring here. Just about the importance of the Straits for a moment. This is approximately a quarter of the world's oil trade, along with significant volumes of fuel and fertilizer that operate through the Straits of Hormuz. The Iranian regime cannot be allowed to dictate who uses this vital waterway. I don't think this is also being reported enough. Maybe you are reporting. I don't read everyone. I don't know many damn outlets here. I don't know who you all are, but I mean, I know who some of you are, but I don't know all of you are. But I will say this about it. This is an international waterway. Okay, this is an international waterway. And international law is very clear, and I love it because everybody always talks about international law on this. International law on this is very clear. International waterways, no country can control them. There is no international law that allows you to say, I'm going to put mines in an international body of water and I'm going to blow up ships that don't listen to us and try to go through. That's what Iran is doing. This is a criminal act. And someone needs to do something about it. Something needs to be done. It's completely illegal, completely illegitimate, and completely unacceptable. And that's why the United States military is guiding stranded commercial ships safely through the strait and is working to restore freedom of navigation and putting an end to these efforts to hold the global economy hostage. So far, as a proof of concept and as a proof of function, 2 U.S. flag merchant ships have successfully transferred the Strait of Hormuz in the first stages of this project, and they're now safely on their way. The U.S. military is deploying the necessary assets to extend this defensive umbrella over commercial shipping. But there should be no mistake. And as I said this already, this is a defensive operation. I want to reiterate that point. This is important to understand. If no shots are fired at these ships and no shots are fired at us, we're not firing shots. But if we're fired on, we will respond, and we will respond with lethal efficiency. The assets supporting this project, by the way, include guided missile destroyers, over 100 land and sea-based aircraft, multi-domain unmanned platforms, and 15,000 of the finest military service members on the planet. These forces have already destroyed, as I told you earlier, I thought it was 6, it's 7 Iranian fast boats that failed to heed our warnings. And by fast boats, we're talking about, some of these things look like Boston whalers. Okay, so these are not like Navy ships. But nonetheless, they come fast at these boats, try to swarm them, try to harm them. We're not going to let that happen. So 7 of them now sit at the bottom of the sea, along with, by the way, the rest of Iran's Navy. That's where you can find their Navy today. And we're going to continue to systematically clear this passageway through the straits to restore freedom of navigation. Now, while this project steadily progresses, Operation Economic Fury, continues to impose maximum pressure on the Iranian regime and what remains of their already frail economy. Today, inflation in Iran is 70%, and their currency is in total and complete freefall. U.S. sanctions enforcement is stepping up. It's moving in lockstep with the naval blockade to degrade Iran's capacity to generate, to move, and repatriate revenue. It directly targets the regime's primary revenue lifelines. The blockade alone is costing Iran as much as $500 million a day in lost revenue. 90% of total Iranian trade has been halted, causing permanent damage to Iran's oil infrastructure as wells are forced to shut in. Again, all of this is in response to their piracy. Okay, it cannot be that you have these straits and they blow up any ship that moves and the only ships that get to go through are theirs. You can't have a situation in which the straits are closed to everyone else, but they benefit from the piracy. That can't happen. That's why the blockade is in place, and that's why these sanctions are crippling them. Any foreign financial, by the way, Treasury is now identifying and cutting off every dollar of revenue that's flowing to this regime. And so, look, any foreign financial institution or commercial actor that enables Iran's sanctions evasion is going to face secondary sanctions exposure and a loss of access to the U.S. financial system. As President Trump has said, and the facts clearly bear out, the United States of America holds all the cards. There is no scenario here in which if they decide to join a ladder of escalation, they wind up getting the last say. But our preference is for these straits to be opened to the way they're supposed to be open, back to the way it was. Anyone can use it, no mines in the water, nobody paying tolls. That's what we have to get back to, and that's the goal here. Every day the conflict continues, however, our leverage on Iran will continue to increase, and their position will continue to weaken, especially as the blockade really begins to bite in conjunction with the sanctions. So, look, the time's come for Iran to make a sensible choice. And it's not easy for them to do that, obviously, because they have a fracture in their own leadership system. And apart from that, I mean, the top people in that government are, to say the least, they're insane in the brain. And so we need to address that, and it's difficult because it's hard to get past that in their system. But it's important for them to make a sensible choice and the one that's right for their people. The president, our president, has proven time and again that his preference is peace. But Iran must accept the reality of this situation and come to the negotiation table and accept terms that are good for them but ultimately good for the world. The diplomatic path, if there's a real diplomatic path, I'm not sure it's going to be one, but if there's a real diplomatic path and we continue to explore it, Steve and Jared are working on that very hard. If there is one there, it could be one that leads them to reconstruction, to prosperity, and to stability, and to not posing a threat to the world. The alternative is growing isolation, economic collapse, and ultimately total defeat. I know what the right choice is for Iran. I hope that the people over there making decisions will make the right one. The last point I would make, and it really is important for them to understand this, is they really shouldn't test the will of the United States, at least not under President Donald Trump. He has proven time and again that he will back up what he says. And if they test him, ultimately they will lose. The hard way, the easy way, the long way, the short way, they will lose. And with that, it's time for your questions. So, Catherine, why don't we start with you first?
Hi, Catherine Barrett, I'm an independent journalist. Secretary Rubio, have you seen any recent indications that Iran is willing to give up its nuclear weapons program that is credible, verifiable, and that would lead to an immediate de-escalation?
Well, look, this is a long-standing problem for them, right? I mean, they have wanted, they have always said they don't want a nuclear weapon. That's because they've always said that, they just don't mean it. And why do you say, well, how do you know they don't mean it? Well, we don't mean it because they're doing all the things, and historically have tried to do all the things that you do if you want a nuclear weapons program. For example, they innovate and try to innovate long-range delivery missiles that now, in some cases, are capable of reaching much of Europe. They build these large underground centrifuges for enrichment activity. There are countries in the world that are involved in the enrichment business, but these guys do it in mountains and in caves and in hiding. They've always had secret components of their nuclear program undisclosed to the world, and we know for a fact that they retain highly enriched uranium at 60%, that they did so, and that has no civilian use, none, zero whatsoever. So they have an opportunity here to agree to something that will make it clear that they're not interested in one thing is to say we don't want a nuclear weapon. Another thing is to do the things that prove you don't want a nuclear weapon. By the way, if what Iran wants is a civilian nuclear program for power plants and stuff like that, there are a lot of countries in the world that have that, and they don't enrich. They import the enriched material. You know, they could have that if that's what they wanted, but they're not acting like that's what they wanted. They're acting like they want a military, nuclear program. That's unacceptable. So that's the process we're engaged in now. To create, that's the object of this diplomacy, is to come up with some level of understanding about what are the topics that they've agreed to negotiate on. We don't have to have the actual agreement written out in one day. This is highly complex and highly technical. But we have to have a diplomatic solution that is very clear about the topics that they are willing to negotiate on and the extent and the concessions they're willing to make at the front end in order to make those talks worthwhile. That's what Stephen Jarrett and the whole team is working on, and I hope to have good news on it. That's the outcome we would prefer. That's the outcome we would have preferred a year ago. That's the outcome I think most of us would have preferred a long time ago. But that's not the option they've given us given their activity. All right, there's no way I can figure out who to call on. I'm just going to press right in the middle, right there, you right there, yeah. Right in the back row.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'll go to you next. I can't get everybody. You know that. All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Secretary Rubio. Keep going right. Welcome to the White House.
What's that?
Talking to me, sir?
Yeah, to you, yes, sir.
Thank you. I have two questions on two separate issues that come
under... Do they get two questions for these?
Two questions.
There's a lot of people in here.
That fall under your umbrella.
All right, well, you can ask me two questions, I'll give you one answer. Go ahead.
Thank you very much.
And I'll pick the one I like better.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The first has to do with the blockade. There are lawmakers from both parties who claim the blockade is an act of war. What do you say to that? And my second question has to do with the fuel embargo of Cuba. How long, Mr. Secretary, will that last?
Okay, two things. All right, good. I'll answer both your questions because I like the second one too. The first one on the blockade. And so why do we have a blockade? We have a blockade because they shut down the straits. So I don't know which members of Congress you're talking to, but here's what I would ask them. I would ask everybody here. It's very simple. These guys have shut down the Straits of Hormuz. This is what Iran is saying. We will shut down the straits. No one can go through. No country in the world can go through unless we allow you to go through, and you have to pay us. But our ships can go through, meaning the Iranian ships, as much as they want. That's crazy. Who would agree to that? So how are we going to have a situation where they get to close the straits to everybody, and the only people who are allowed to go through there 100% without paying anything are the Iranians? If you do that, they'll keep the straits closed forever. They're trying to make this some new normal. Okay, under no circumstances can we ever allow them to normalize the fact that they get to blow up commercial ships and put mines in the water. So the response to that is we're going to blockade your ships. If everyone's ships are not getting out, your ships are not getting out either. That's not an act of war. That's a defensive measure. It's a counter to what they have decided to do. You know what is an act of war? Putting mines in the water. Why don't the members of Congress, whoever it is complaining about it, they should be all over that. These guys put mines in the water. That alone, mining in the water is illegal, period, under any circumstances, and they've done it. But this is crazy stuff, but this is what they've done. On Cuba, oil blockade on Cuba. There's no oil blockade on Cuba per se. Here's what's happening with Cuba, okay? Cuba used to get free oil from Venezuela. Used to give them a bunch of free oil. They would take like 60% of that oil and resell it for cash. It wouldn't even go to benefit the people. So the only blockade that's happened is the Venezuelans have decided we're not giving you free oil anymore. And you can only imagine nowadays, the way oil prices are, no one's giving away free oil, much less to a failed regime. So the problem with Cuba is worse, okay? Their economic model doesn't work. Doesn't work. And the people who are in charge can't fix it. And the reason that I can't fix it is not just because they're communists, that's bad enough, but they're incompetent communists. The only thing worse than a communist is an incompetent one. And that's what, so incompetent communists run that country, they don't know how to fix it. They really don't. And we have 90 miles from our shores a failed state that also happens to be friendly territory for some of our adversaries. So it's an unacceptable status quo. and we'll be addressing it, but not today. Okay. All right, let's go to the front, right there.
Secretary Rubio.
Yeah.
You are going to the Vatican to meet with the Pope. Is this an attempt to smooth things over with the Pope, given the rhetoric between President Trump and Pope Leo?
No, I mean, it's a trip we had planned from before, and obviously we had some stuff that happened. And no, look, there's a lot to talk about with the Vatican. I'll give you one example. The Pope just returned from a trip to Africa, where the church is growing very vibrantly. And we have shared concerns about religious freedom, freedom in different parts of the world. We'd love to talk to them about that. The topic of Cuba, you know, we gave Cuba $6 million of humanitarian aid, but obviously they won't let us distribute it. We distributed it through the church. We'd like to do more. We're willing to give more humanitarian aid to Cuba, by the way, distributed through the church, but the Cuban regime has to allow us to do it. They won't allow us to give their own people more humanitarian aid, and we're willing to do it through the church. So there's a lot to talk about.
And the president recently said that the Pope is endangering a lot of Catholics as a result of his rhetoric around the Iran war. Is that a sentiment?
Well, I don't think that's an accurate description of what he said. I think what the president basically said is that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon because they would use it against places that have a lot of Catholics and Christians and others, for that matter. It goes back to the central point. I think the president, without trying to speak for him, but I think I can characterize it this way. He doesn't understand why anybody, leave aside the Pope, the president, and I, for that matter, I think most people, I cannot understand why anyone would think that it's a good idea for Iran to ever have a nuclear weapon. Look what they're doing with the Straits right now. They're holding the whole world hostage. They have these sailors, you know, on commercial ships that are going to starve to death out there. They don't care. They don't care that this is melting down the economies around the world, even of their own allies. This is what they're doing with the Straits. What do you think they would do if they had a nuclear weapon? They would hold the world hostage with that nuclear weapon. That's what they would do. They would do exactly to the world with a nuclear weapon what they're doing now with the Straits. And I think the president's point is how anyone cannot see that as an unacceptable outcome and an unacceptable risk is beyond him. It's puzzling. And someone has to do something about it. The difference between this president and like the 6 presidents that preceded him were that he's the only one that's actually been willing to do something about it. Everyone says Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, but you got to do something about it at some point. And he's been willing to address that threat. And that's what he promised he would do when he got elected, by the way, is address threats like this.
Secretary.
Yeah, I wish I knew your name,
thank you
guys.
so
I
much,
apologize.
Mr.
Can you put name tags on?
Thank you so much, Mr.
Okay.
Secretary.
Who are you with? Who are you with?
I'm with Rudao Media Network.
Okay.
Mr. Secretary, the president has said multiple times that weapons were provided to the Kurdish groups to pass on the Iranian people. However, Kurdish political parties and the regional government says they have not received such weapons. Even some claim these weapons remain in the U.S. base in the region. Can you clarify who those weapons were given to and whether you intend to retrieve them or still want to pass to the Iranian people?
Yeah, look, ultimately, what the president is expressing, and I think has repeatedly, is he wished the Iranian people had, you know, look, he's heartbroken by these images. You think about it, you're an Iranian, okay? You're unhappy that your economy doesn't work for you. You don't have freedom. You don't have an opportunity to express yourself. You know, you've got friends that have been shot in the head because they're out protesting. And it's heartbreaking to him to see that these people are abused in this way and have no measures to take against their own government as a result of it. By the way, this goes back, if you guys remember the protests in 2009 where they slaughtered people in the street. This is a vicious regime, guys. Okay? These are people that hang people from cranes in the town square so everyone can see. They continue these executions of people and have continue to do so for over a decade and a half now. And so I think what the president is expressing is the desire that he wishes the Iranian people had an ability to fight back against some of these things that are happening to them. And I would view that as distinct and separate from the specifics of this operation that was ongoing before it concluded, and certainly different from the operation that's going on now. Right there in the
regarding Colombia, Mr. Secretary.
Right behind you, not Colombia, right there. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Secretary, thank you so much. On Lebanon, are
Yes.
we in a ceasefire or less fire? And the second question, do you think you would be able to achieve an agreement between Lebanon and Israel without risking a civil war in Lebanon? What are you doing to risk? What are you doing to?
No, I got it. I got the gist of your question. So look, here's the challenge with Lebanon. Okay, there's no problem between the Lebanese government and the Israeli government. Israel doesn't claim any land in Lebanon belongs to them, and by and large, I think a peace deal between Lebanon and Israel is imminently achievable and should be. The problem with Israel and Lebanon is not Israel or Lebanon, it's Hezbollah. Hezbollah operates from inside of Lebanese territory. They terrorize and attack Israelis, but they also are inflicting tremendous damage on the Lebanese people. The reason why Lebanon gets attacked by Israel is because of Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is hiding in some house, launching rockets against Israelis, and then they get hit. So what you're seeing now is Israeli responses to either attacks or perceived threats. And this is not new. This has been going on for a very long time. What is our hope? Our hope is to engage the Lebanese and Israeli governments under our mediation at the table to achieve this. And that is having Lebanese armed forces and a Lebanese government, not just with the willingness, but with the capability to begin to challenge Hezbollah and disarm them. Because the Lebanese people are also victims of Hezbollah. And by the way, on the topic of Hezbollah in Lebanon, who is behind Hezbollah? Why do they exist? They're an agent of Iran. If you go through that Middle East and you identify every problem, Hamas, Hezbollah, to some extent the Houthis, obviously, and others, behind every one of these groups is Tehran. So apart from the nuclear weapons, apart from all these other things, these guys are behind all the bad actors. Hezbollah is a wing. It's an extension of Iranian desire to destabilize the region. So we're very committed to this process. It's not going to be easy. You're asking me a complex question. You know this has been going on for a very long time. It's not going to be easy. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that both sides continue to talk so that progress can be made on some sort of permanent ceasefire that isn't constantly spoiled by Hezbollah and by Hezbollah violence. Right in the middle, right there.
Thank you, sir.
I'm winging it, guys, okay? Right there, yes, sir.
You mentioned the 2 U.S. ships that safely crossed the Strait of Hormuz. Are other ships being told it's safer to get back to regular levels, or are we still going to see limits in place for the foreseeable future?
For obvious reasons, I'm not going to broadcast who we're talking to or who we're telling them to move. I mean, we want these operations to be safe, and I think as it unfolds and ships get through, we'll make those announcements after the fact, just for operational security purposes. But the goal here is pretty simple. Establish a zone of transit that is protected by a bubble, the United States, both naval and air assets, and then allow ships who want to move through there and get to market, to begin to increase confidence in the ability to do so. That doesn't happen in 12 hours. It takes time to set up that bubble and gain that confidence, but that's the goal. We have been in touch. We've been in touch, I don't know, with a bunch of different liners about moving, and we're hoping to continue to improve the security situation, and we'll start to see some of that movement, and we'll announce it as it happens after the fact. We're not going to be like broadcasting, hey, tomorrow at 12, ship X is going to be coming through, for obvious reasons, because that degrades the security. But we feel confident we're going to be able to achieve that. Look, it's not going to solve the whole Straits problem. It's going to solve a lot of it, but it's important to challenge what Iran is doing now. Guys, again, I wonder if you take anything away today, and I can't tell you what to write, but Iran cannot be allowed to normalize this control of the Straits. It's completely unlawful, illegal. It's outrageous. And every country in the world should be joining us and condemning it and doing something about it. But the United States has stepped up and is trying to do something about it.
Regarding Colombia, Mr. Secretary, we've had several tourists.
I'm sorry. We'll see if we get to Colombia today. Go ahead. You guys have an election now. Why don't you wait till after your election?
Mr. Secretary, Tom Michael Ross with Daily Mail. I was curious about your meeting with Southcom earlier. There was a picture, a map of Cuba behind you. What did you discuss with Southcom about Cuba? And do you have any updates on?
I'm not going to tell you what I discussed with Southcom.
but it had to do something with Cuba.
No,
what about?
Cuba's in Southcom. You know,
Fair
it's the closest part. And so the second point, I was there. Our ambassadors were in from the whole Western Hemisphere. I was addressing them. I'm meeting the general who just took command of Southcom. And there happened to be a map of Cuba. And I said, it'd be good if we took a picture in front of that map, because it's like the closest thing in Southcom to the United States. So there it is. We have maps of other countries, huh?
What about Greenland? Any update on Greenland?
No, they didn't have that map then. They only had in the red, right there in the red.
In the red, okay. Cristina de Telemundo, Mr. Sec. Can I ask you in Spanish, or can I ask
Yeah, you can answer in Spanish. You can ask me. They'll have to translate for them what you ask
me.
Well,
I'll say it in English, and if you can answer in both languages. Today I checked the webpage of the State Department, and there's still a $25 million bounty on Diosdado Cabello, the Secretary of Interior, for drug trafficking and narco-terrorism. I was wondering if that has been put on hold, or if you're negotiating with President Delcy Rodriguez to turn him over.
I don't have any updates for you on that. The website is what it is, and that's where it stands. That policy hasn't changed. But guys, let's be mature here a little bit. I'm not going to tell you about what we're talking about with the leader of these countries.
El Departamento de Estado sigue considerando a Diosdado Cabello un narcoterrorista y un narcotraficante, como dice en la página del Departamento de Estado.
La política de Estados Unidos en ese tema no ha cambiado, y cuando cambie te dejaremos saber. The politics of the United States on that, the policy of the United States on that topic hasn't changed. When it does, obviously we'll inform you, but I don't have any news for you on that today. Right there in the green. I'll get to you guys. Are you guys all the TV people?
Yeah. No.
All right, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go. I'm learning. They gave me a little map. I don't know where I put it of the people here. Some of you had like red X's. I'm kidding. No, it's not true. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
The average price of gas in the country right now is $4.50. Do you have a thought on how long Americans are supposed to kind of accept this? Do you think it will affect Republicans' majorities in the midterms?
Well, I'm not going to speculate on the politics of it. You can tell me. I mean, look, it's obviously being driven by global events. That was true during the Russia-Ukraine war as well, where you saw that come up. It's one. Look, we don't benefit from the straits as much as other countries. I don't know if you've seen what the gas prices are like in other parts of the world that are really suffering, big time. So we're very fortunate that the United States, I believe, right now is like the world's largest net exporter of oil and natural gas as a result, not because of this war, but because we have this capacity. So we've been insulated to some degree. We're obviously still vulnerable to some extent to global prices, and so. But in the end, I mean, we're more insulated than other countries, even though that's not welcome news to Americans that are paying more at the pump, no doubt about it. And it certainly is one of the circumstances of it. There are people that were predicting would be much higher at this point, but we're not taking that for granted. Suffice it to say that this is. Think about it this way. Everybody needs to think about it this way. If Iran had a nuclear weapon and they decided to close the straits and make our gas prices like $9 a gallon or $8 a gallon, we wouldn't be able to do anything about it because they have a nuclear weapon. And a nuclear-armed Iran could do whatever the hell they want with the straits, and there's nothing anyone would be able to do about it. And that's one of the many reasons, apart from like the massive loss of life in a nuclear strike, why Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. I mean, so this is an example of if they had a nuclear weapon, they closed the straits and they would tell the world, what are you going to do about it? We have a nuclear weapon. We can attack you with it. That's the world none of us want to leave behind. It won't happen under this president's watch, but some future president and future, in the future Americans will have to deal with this. So it's just one more example of why these guys can never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. Right there, in the black. Right, you in the black. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Where you? No, right there. You both are wearing black.
Thank you.
She's closer. No, you don't have black. You have blue on. I'm colorblind, but I know blue and black.
Thank you so much.
Right there. Yes, ma'am. No, you. The first one I called on.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. This is chaos, guys. Go ahead.
Welcome to the White House.
You've long been a leading voice on human rights in China, and so including religious persecution and forced organ harvesting. So President Trump prepares to meet Xi Jinping next week. Do you expect human rights concerns to be on the table? Or
well, we always raise those issues, and they remain true. And I think we've proven in some cases it's most effective to raise them in the appropriate setting. But we always raise those issues. They're important to us, among with others, of course. But those issues remain prominent in our view and in our conversation about these things. And we'll continue to raise them in the appropriate forums. All right, let's get to the front. These guys are going to get mad. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Segment Kelly, Associated Press. You mentioned earlier that some countries have privately and publicly indicated their willingness to help with Project Freedom. Can you say how many have reached out to the U.S. with their offers of help and what kind of capabilities?
Well, thank you for your question. That's a good question. I mean, multiple countries have said we got to do something about it and fix it.
Is it like dozens or single digits or more than 100? Or?
I don't know. I don't put a number on it. I would just tell you that here's what I would say about it. The capabilities is the issue. Okay, a lot of countries would love to do something about it. They don't have a navy, right? Or they can't get there in time, or they can't. Others, are less. That some unfortunately do have a navy are saying, oh, we'll be involved, but we'll be involved after it's over. Well, after it's over, it's kind of like that makes sense. So, we'd like to have it. Now, there may be some utility in a post, closure mission. I'm not downplaying that, but I think that's been the challenge. But there are other ways they can help, unique ways that they can help. And I don't want to get into who these countries are for obvious reasons, because they are prepared to help us in certain ways, but maybe don't want that publicly disclosed for no other reason than it impact their foreign policy. It could have some domestic ramifications. But ultimately, I don't want to mislead you. The primary responsibility for this Project Freedom is on the United States because we're the only country that can project power in that part of the world the way we're doing now. We're the only ones that can do it, and we're going to do it as a favor to the world. Understand this. This is a favor to the world because it's their ships that are stranded. It's their fuel supplies that are stranded. By the way, it's there's humanitarian aid destined for different countries in the world that's stranded in the Persian Gulf right now. It's the fertilizer that they need for their food and crops that's stranded in the Persian, not our fertilizer, their fertilizer. So we want to be helpful, and that's why the president stepped forward, because we're the only ones that can. Frankly, we're the only ones that can.
Mr. Secretary, on the rising oil and gas prices, the president has said that this is a small price to pay for getting rid of a nuclear weapon. But 10 weeks in, are we any closer to getting rid of Iran's nuclear material?
Yeah, but look, here's the way to think about Iran, and this is what I described at the very beginning of this. What was Iran's plan? You have to understand what their plan was. Their plan was they were going to build this conventional shield where they would have so many thousands of missiles and drones and rockets that they couldn't be attacked. And behind that conventional shield that they were trying to build, they would then break out and do whatever they wanted with their nuclear program. They no longer have that conventional shield. Okay, we told you guys from the very beginning, And we're very consistent in this messaging. The operation that has concluded was going to destroy their Navy. They have no Navy left. They don't. Not a Navy. They have small boats and Boston whalers, but they don't have a Navy left. They don't have an Air Force. I challenge you. When is the last time you read or heard about an Iranian jet flying anywhere? They don't have an Air Force. Their missile launching capability has been substantially degraded, and their industrial base, their defense industrial base, has been severely, severely damaged. So their ability to build a shield behind which they could hide their nuclear program was wiped out. That's a very substantial achievement, and that was the purpose of this operation from day one.
Their nuclear material in order for this war to end.
Well, that's one of the topics that needs to be discussed. I don't know about, I think you're linking it. The operation is over. Epic Fury, as the President notified Congress, we're done with that stage of it. Okay, we're now on to this project of freedom. As far as a negotiation is concerned, I think the President's been clear that part of the negotiation process has to be not just the enrichment, but what happens to this material that's buried deep somewhere that they still have access to if they ever wanted to dig it out. That has to be addressed, and that's being addressed in the negotiation. I'm not going to go further on what progress has been made on that topic because I don't want to endanger the negotiations, but suffice it to say that the President and this entire team is aware of the centrality of that question, and that will have to be addressed one way or the other.
Right
there. Right there. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Secretary, I have another two-part question for you.
Okay.
First, are you taking part in those negotiations that you just detailed there? And then secondly, President Trump has made it clear that the U.S. doesn't rely on the Strait of Hormuz. So why should Americans even care about Project Freedom and these shipping tankers going through?
Well, I think on the second point is the one I want to address first, and that is why should Americans care and why it matters to us? Because ultimately these things have an impact on the global economy, which ultimately has an impact on our economy in the long term. That's number one. Number two, because if we live in a world where a rogue state like this Iranian regime is allowed to claim as a new normal control of our international shipping lane, it will not be long before you see that happen in multiple shipping lanes around the world. I can identify for you six or seven vital shipping lanes around the world that some countries can decide, guess what, if Iran was able to do it, we're going to do it too. We're not going to start charging tolls. And it'll get closer and closer to us. That's unacceptable. We cannot live in a world, there's a lot of time and energy been invested behind the idea that international waters are free for the free flow of goods. The stuff we make in this country and export has to go through international shipping lanes. And for us to live in a world where a country can decide, now we own the international shipping lane and you have to pay us if you want to use it, that is a normal that we will never be able to accept. And that's what the Iranians are trying to get us to do. So we're doing two things about it, and we haven't talked about the second one enough. The second thing we're doing is we're going to the UN. Everybody loves the UN, right? We're trying to go to the UN, and we're saying, okay, countries of the world, condemn this. Say that it is wrong for you to put mines there. It is wrong for you to shoot at commercial vessels. Guys, that's what we're talking about here. These guys are bombing commercial vessels. They're not bombing naval vessels. They're bombing commercial tankers. It's just outrageous. That needs to stop, and it needs to end. And if it doesn't, then the world should be diplomatically and economically isolating Iran as well. But if we live in a world where global shipping lanes can be taken over by countries, that'll have a direct impact on Americans in the short and the long term, and we can't let it start by Iran doing it. And we're the only ones that can do anything about it. All right. Right there in the green. Go ahead. Yes.
Mr. Secretary, does the President intend to press Beijing on its Taiwan policy when he visits China next week?
I'm sure Taiwan will be a topic of conversation. It always is. As you know, we understand the Chinese understand our position on that topic. We understand theirs. And I think both parties, without getting ahead of myself of what will happen in the talks, but I think both countries understand that it is neither one of our interests to see anything destabilize happen in that part of the world. We don't need any destabilizing events to occur with regards to Taiwan or anywhere in the Indo-Pacific. And I think that's to the mutual benefit of both the United States and the Chinese.
Secretary, Kara Castanova from Lindell TV. Thank you for taking my question today. How does the State Department...
What happened? Why is everybody giggling? What happened? I'm sorry. Are they mean to you?
No, they're not mean.
Oh, okay.
I don't think they are. I hope not. But I'm Kara from Lindell TV, and nice to ask you a question today, sir. How does the State Department interpret the President's recent remarks when he said, quote, the Iranian people need to have guns, and I think they are getting some guns, end quote. What did he mean, and do those comments relate to any ongoing or potential U.S. actions like supplying those weapons?
Well, I think it goes back to the question I was asked a moment ago. I think the President thinks it's heartbreaking that the Iranian people are abused by this regime the way they are. In the end, I mean, this regime is not, guys, I know I've said this, I think I said this in my hearing before the Senate when I got confirmed. I don't know of any country in the world where there's a bigger difference between the people and the people who run the country. Okay, this country is run by radical Shia clerics. And that's not what Iran and the Iranian people are. Now, they may be Shia, but they're not radicals and they're not clerics, and they just want a normal life and a regular life, and in many ways a very cosmopolitan country with an incredible history and incredible legacy and the like. So there's this huge divide between the people of Iran, whom we sympathize with, and who the president sympathizes with, because they're the ones suffering. Look, the world is a victim of Iran, okay? The world is a victim of Iran because they're terrorists, because of what they're doing now in the Straits. But the people of Iran are daily victims of the regime, and the president has deep sympathy for what they're going through. And I think he's just expressing that sympathy and that frustration that they don't have the ability to do more to get rid of this regime that has crushed this country and isolated it from the world, which is a country that shouldn't be isolated from the world because its people are phenomenal. All right. I wish I had like a dice. Go ahead. Yeah. No, right there, because I'm going to Italy. Voy a Italia. Déjame hablar con el señor. Okay. He's Italian. I know him. He used to cover Capitol Hill. You're Italian, right?
For many years.
For many years.
Yeah,
Okay.
Daniele Compatangelo. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. So I have two short questions for you.
Oh, the damn two questions.
First, as you head to the Vatican and Italy, how do you view the Pope's global role amid current geopolitical shift? And what are your objectives in Italy? Is this trip tied to recent remarks by the President suggesting Italy has not been supported as expected? And the second one is about the Hezbollah in Lebanon. On a recent interview on Fox News, you raised some concern about stronger vetting within the Lebanese armed forces. What do you make? Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, I've answered the first one about the Vatican. Look, I mean, the Pope is obviously the vicar of Christ, is a Roman Catholic, but he's also the head of a nation state, and it's an organization that has a presence in over 100-something countries around the world. And we engage with the Vatican quite a bit because they're present in many different places. I've already outlined to you two examples. We worked with the Catholic Church on the distribution of humanitarian aid in Cuba. We share with the Catholic Church a concern about the destruction of religious liberty, the persecution of Christian minorities, and also, the challenges that are being faced by Christians in Africa, where the Pope just recently visited. So we have a lot to talk about with them, and I engage with them quite a bit on that front. So the trip is really not tied to anything other than the fact that it would be normal for us to engage with them, and other Secretary of States have done that in the past. On the second point about Lebanon, also a question that was asked earlier. And what was the Italian part?
About the expectation that the President...
Oh, no, look, I mean, the Italians have been involved for some time in training the police and in training their forces, so we'd love to hear their input on it. And in the way, look, we welcome everybody's help eventually. What has to happen in Lebanon, what everybody wants to see, is that you have a Lebanese government with the capability to go after Hezbollah and take the Hezbollah apart. There shouldn't be a Hezbollah and a government. There should be a government. Everyone should fold underneath it. And if we do that, then there will be peace between Israel and Lebanon. But we have to build the capacity of the Lebanese to do it. And I think Italy could be helpful in that regard. All right. Did I call on you already? You already got a question? In the green? Did I call on you already?
No.
Okay, all right. Go ahead.
You mentioned the UN resolution that
Yes.
you announced today. Can you talk about what the goal is with that resolution? And there was a similar one last month that was vetoed by China and Russia. You spoke to the Russian foreign minister. Do you have an assurance that Russia will be on board with this now?
Well, we don't know.
Yeah,
look, I mean, everyone wouldn't want to see this vetoed again, and then we've made some slight adjustments to the language, but I don't know if it'll avoid a veto or not, but the language isn't very complicated. And I think it's a real test for the UN, right? As something that functions that can solve global problems. What is the purpose of the UN? The UN was supposed to be a place where you could peacefully resolve global conflict. Right now you have a country who is unlawfully, criminally, and illegally taking possession of an international waterway and blowing up commercial vessels and putting mines in the water. I don't know if people appreciate how outrageous this is, how unacceptable it is that any country would fire and try to sink commercial vessels or put mines in the water. Both of these things are illegal. And so we're going to take it to the UN, and we're going to give it another chance to be a forum in which we're not even asking people to commit troops to the region and help blow up the Iranian boats. All we're asking them to do is to condemn it, to call on Iran to stop blowing ships, to remove these mines, and to allow humanitarian relief to come through, because there's humanitarian aid that's trapped. That's it. This is a very modest request. And if you're telling me that the international community and hundreds of countries cannot rally behind that, then I don't know what the utility of the UN system is if it can't even solve something as straightforward as that. And I think to both the Chinese and the Russians, I would argue and have argued that it is in their interest for that resolution to pass and for pressure to be brought on Iran, because it is in their interest not to see international waterways, including the Straits of Hormuz, be closed down and cause economic chaos to dozens and dozens of countries around the world. Okay. Back row, yellow tie. Back row, yes, sir. Yeah.
With CBN News, you've had a deep faith for God and country. At the end of the day, with all that you've been involved in,
keep going.
You've been extremely busy.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
As we all know. I got to ask you, what is your hope for America at a time such as this?
My hope for America?
And how do you personally deal with that?
Yeah, look, I mean, my hope for America is what it's always been. I think it's the hope I hope we all share. We want it to continue to be the place where anyone from anywhere can achieve anything, where you're not limited by the circumstances of your birth, by the color of your skin, by your ethnicity, but frankly, it's a place where you are able to overcome challenges and achieve your full potential. I think that should be the goal of every country in the world, frankly. But I think in the U.S., we're not perfect. Our history is not one of perfection, but it's still better than anybody else's history. And ours is a story of perpetual improvement. Each generation has left the next generation of Americans freer, more prosperous, safer, and that is our goal as well. But it is a unique and exceptional country, and as we come upon this 250-year anniversary, I think we have a lot to learn and be proud of in our history. It is one of perpetual and continuous improvement, where each generation has done its part to bring us closer to fulfilling the vision that the founders of this country had upon its founding. So, thank you. All right. I have time for 2 more questions. All right, right there in the pink. No, you right there. That lady. No, the one right next to you in the pink. No, the pink. I'm sorry, but I pointed at her. I need to get a laser pointer and just go. Now you in the pink jacket, the lady right there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I have a question on Iran-China relations.
Okay.
What's your reaction to Iranian foreign minister visit to China? Also, Beijing instructed its firms to ignore U.S. sanctions. Could you also address that?
Well, I'll direct you to Treasury on that front. There are options that we have. If you ignore our sanctions, you're going to face secondary sanctions. And I don't have an announcement for you on that today, but we don't do these things, for symbolic purposes. On the first point about the visit, it's fine. I hope the Chinese tell him what he needs to be told, and that is that what you are doing in the Straits is causing you to be globally isolated. You're the bad guy in this. You guys should not be blowing up ships. You should not be putting mines. You should not be trying to hold hostage the global economy. I hope the Chinese bring, whether it's done privately, but I hope it's done directly, that's the message they deliver to them. As I outlined earlier today, China is an export-driven economy. Okay, I'm not here to speak on behalf of what's in the best interest of China, but it's obvious. China is an export-driven economy. That means they depend on other countries to buy from them. Well, you can't buy from them if you can't ship it there, and you can't buy from them if your economy is being destroyed by what Iran is doing. So it is in China's interest that Iran stop closing the straits. It's harming China as well. The gentleman in the red tie, right there. Yes, I'm sorry, what's your name?
Liz Landers with PBS NewsHour.
Okay.
Another question about the China-Iran relationship. You said at the beginning of your comments at the top that every single financial situation will be targeted. Does that include Chinese banks? Would the president sanction
We're going to enforce our sanctions. I don't have an announcement for you. That will have to come from Treasury. But we have sanctions in place. And sanctions don't mean anything unless, you're going to do something about them. So I think that's been clear. I think that, the Treasury will follow up with any specific announcements. Suffice it to say, we're serious about our sanctions. Then a cost needs to be imposed on Iran for what they are doing. Otherwise, if they get away with this, guys, if they get away with pulling this thing off without paying a price for it and backing down, you're going to see multiple places around the world where other countries are going to be tempted to do the same. This is unacceptable. Again, I want to reiterate the point. We keep arguing back and forth about the war and the shooting and this and that or the other. These guys have shut down an international waterway. The Straits of Hormuz do not belong to Iran. They don't have a right to shut it down and blow up ships and lay mines. And that's what they've done. That needs to be addressed. Otherwise, and it cannot be normalized. Under no circumstances can we live in a world where we accept, okay, this is normal. You have to coordinate with Iran. You have to pay them a toll in order to go through the Straits of Hormuz. Not only is that unacceptable in the Straits, you're creating a precedent that could be repeated in multiple other places around the world. The whole world should join us in this condemnation, and the whole world should join us in doing something about it, by the way. It shouldn't just be us. We're hoping to get countries. We're going to give them a chance to do something about it at the United Nations. All right, my last question. That lady in the right there in the white.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Right there. Well,
Thank you.
okay, hold on, stop this up. Go ahead. Okay, I'll do 2 more and then I gotta go. Yeah, go ahead. Iran has shown what? Okay.
Iran has shown that it's been able to withstand a lot of pressure. And yesterday, President Trump has said that they may run out of oil storage in 2 weeks. Do you believe that that will be the thing that gets them to the table to give up their nuclear ambitions? And if not, what will be that thing?
Well, look, they're suffering devastating damage to their economy. You're right, but it's not that they're able to withstand pressure, it's that they don't care that their people are suffering. You understand, right? There's a difference between we can withstand pressure and we actually don't care. Now, I think there are people in their system that care more than others. You know, some of the elected people that you see, some of the people you see on television with the suits on, you know, those guys care because they know at the end of the day they have to live in the reality. And then you have another element of their government, the clerics, the IRGC types, who probably are more immune to that and care less. They're more interested in regime survival at all costs. But ultimately, the pressure points are what they are.
Are they less divided now than they were before? Because the administration has said that the Iranian regime is divided, making it very challenging.
Well, it's been challenging to deal with them diplomatically because, for example, an offer will be made and then it takes 5 or 6 days to get a response because you have to get it through the whole system. They have to find the supreme leader wherever he hides. They got to get him to sign off, and that's their system. Their system has always been multi-layered in this way. It's obviously become more complex because of the damage they suffered during the war. But look, suffice it to say, Iran has to pay a price. They're not going to change their position out of the kindness of their heart. There has to be a pressure point on them that causes them to realize they cannot continue to close the straits, or they face crushing economic consequences, but also, you know, global diplomatic isolation. Which they have proven in the past to be susceptible to. But you're right, they have a high pain threshold, but they don't have an unlimited pain threshold. Nobody does. All right, this has to be the last question. Go ahead.
Secretary, many people want to know, what is your DJ name?
My DJ name?
Your DJ name.
You're not ready for my DJ name.
On the war, if the fighting were to resume, because you've said that Operation Epic Fury is over, the president also said that the U.S. would bomb them off the face of the earth if they tried to go after U.S. ships. So if the fighting resumes, are you saying that it would resume under Project Freedom? And I ask, as it relates to the War Powers Act.
Yeah, look, the Operation Epic Fury is concluded. We achieved the objectives of that operation. I'm not going to, you know, we're not cheering for an additional situation to occur. We would prefer the path of peace. What the president would prefer is a deal. He would prefer to sit down, work out a memorandum of understanding for future negotiations that touches on all the key topics that have to be addressed, a full opening of the strait so the world can get back to normal. And he preferred that be negotiated through the route that Steve and Jared have been working and that all of us have been supporting. That's the route he prefers. That is so far not the route that Iran has chosen. And so the result has been that the United States has to do something about the fact that we're the only nation on earth that can do anything to open up a lane within the Straits of Hormuz to get product and to rescue these people that are trapped in there. And that's what we're undergoing now. What that may lead to in the future is speculative. I'm not going to speculate about what it would take or what it would do. But look, the message to Iran, these guys are facing, they are facing real catastrophic destruction to their economy, generational destruction to their economy, generational destruction to the wealth of their country, imposed on themselves by the actions that they're taking. They should check themselves before they wreck themselves in the direction that they're going.
Does the White House believe that these votes coming up in Congress are a moot point then?
Look, guys, I love talking about this topic. It's about the War Powers Act. Yeah. Okay, I love it. I was hoping somebody would ask. All right, hold on. No, boy, you don't let me answer. I got to answer the question. Okay, and I love it. I'll tell you why I love it. Because even as a senator, I said something. The War Powers Act is unconstitutional, 100%. Now, this is not the position of me, not the position of the President of the United States now. This is the position of every single president that has occupied this position since the day that law passed. It's completely unconstitutional. Now, we comply with it in terms of like notification because we want to preserve good relations with Congress, right? And we do that. But even as a senator, I would say that the War Powers Act is 100% unconstitutional. And look, I know some of you, whatever you want to say, but this is not this president's position. That has been the position of every single presidential administration since the day that law passes. An infringement on the president's constitutional powers. We don't acknowledge the law as constitutional. Nonetheless, we comply with elements of it for purposes of maintaining, you know, good relations with Congress. And we want them to be involved and we want them to be informed. I have gone on Capitol Hill, 4 times this year for all senators and all House members and Intel Committee and Gang of 8. We want them to be involved in this. But I want to be clear on the point of the War Powers Act. It's unconstitutional, and every president and every administration has taken that position. All right, guys, I gave you 50 minutes. Thank you, guys.
And you were just watching Secretary of State Marco Rubio at the White House press briefing saying for the first time today that Operation Epic Fury has concluded and that the objectives have been achieved, and reiterating the fact that the Strait of Hormuz is an international waterway and that every country has the right to transit through the strait without threat from Iran, and saying Project Freedom is a defensive measure. There's no back and forth between the U.S. and Iran, only a response when Iran attacks. Okay, moving on. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche says new court evidence will support the government's argument that former FBI Director James Comey's post was a criminal threat against President Trump. Joining us now to discuss is Rebecca Koffler, former CIA officer, national security consultant, and author of the book Putin's Playbook, Russia's Secret Plan to Defeat America. So Rebecca, good afternoon, and thank you so much for being here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Okay, so the first question I want to ask you here is, in the intelligence community, how do you distinguish whether something is a credible threat? For example, James Comey as the former FBI director posting 8647 on Instagram.
Well, I think the way that we distinguish in the intelligence community is very different from what they use, the process that they use in law enforcement. It's two different things. In the intelligence community, we look at the capability and the intent. If a foreign adversary has the capability to harm the United States, whether it's kinetically or in non-kinetic means, and then do they actually plan to use that capability? That's how we assess. In the law enforcement, it's very different, but if we talk about this specific action that James Comey took, which is using that 8647 language, anyone, whether you're in the law enforcement or in the intelligence community, knows what that means. It means take out whoever the 47 is. In this case, it's President Trump. You can take out, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to use it, with an assassination type of measure. You can do it procedurally, such an impeachment, but everyone knows what the actual intent behind that post is.
And I just want to mention, he was FBI director when he posted this 8647. Does that change things?
Absolutely, 100%. If it's some kid, let's say, posted on Instagram or on Twitter, or some influencer, right? Nobody would care, yes, and it could be possibly believable that he just found, that kid or whoever just found those little seashells. But if you're an FBI director, and everyone to whom you are appealing, for whom this particular post was intended to, know exactly what James Comey meant.
Now, James Comey is saying that he didn't know what it meant. That's what he's saying. But, just for argument's sake, even if it's not intended as a threat, is there still a risk, do you think, that it could inspire others or certain people to take action, for example?
Well, it already has, right? We have had, and it's not just Comey, but it's people like him who continuously whip out this anti-Trump propaganda, right? And we are right now in a country where we've had 3 assassination attempts on the U.S. president in the span of 2 years at this point. So clearly, and especially, a very significant one was the last one, right? Where you have a person who is not necessarily mentally deranged. He sounds quite normal. He's highly educated. He speaks and writes cogently. And he actually made a very convincing and persuasive case that President Trump, to somebody who really believes in that completely distorted reality that people like Comey and like this last assassin have created, that case would be quite persuasive that somebody who has conducted those things, who's done those things that President Trump didn't do should be taken out. So yes, absolutely, it is very dangerous for somebody like James Comey to incite this sort of violence, to actually normalize. And it's pretty much normalized right now because thousands of Americans, according to recent research, believe the political violence is actually justified in certain cases. That is in America. That is absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah, definitely unacceptable. And it is dangerous, as you mentioned earlier. And President Trump and his administration is holding the position that Comey has been a figure in efforts to undermine his presidency. How do you view that?
He has been Comey, and I call them his conspiracy creators, orchestrators in partners in crime. Let's just say, speaking figuratively, right? And who are his partners in crime? It's former DNI Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, former CIA Director John Brennan, and Comey. Right? All of them served as part of the intelligence apparatus under President Barack Obama. And so what did President Obama do? He ordered what we call an intelligence community assessment, an ICA, which is a flagship product by the entire intelligence community, which consists of right now of 18 agencies, right? And as a former DIA intelligence officer, I was part of drafting and coordinating these types of flagship documents. So President Obama, in December 2016, just a month before President Trump actually ran to become president, before the elections, right, he created an ICA that was produced and published on January 6, 2017, and the key conclusion of that was that the Russian government, and specifically Putin, ordered interference by Russia through cyber means in US elections, and with Putin wanted Trump to become president. So they alleged that there was an interference by Russia, and Trump and Putin were in collusion, right? Which is absolute. Nothing can be, further from the truth. It's a conspiracy. It's a hoax, as President Trump said. But the damage to the country was done. What did it do? The country became polarized. Basically, the credibility of President Trump was undermined among about half of Americans. And it completely derailed and disrupted his presidency, because what followed was, all these various impeachments and all these various lies that subverted American democracy. And that is, in my view, that's even a bigger crime than 8647, if you will.
Okay, I want to talk to you more about Russiagate, which you write about in your book, right?
Yes.
And before that, though, I want to ask you, what do you think will come out of this this case with James Comey, this indictment? What do you think will come out of it?
So, well, we know that the first indictment was dismissed, right? It is extremely difficult to prove something that like this, the 8647, because James Comey said he was just joking, right? Well, that's laughable, we all know. Anybody who knows what that means and knows who he is knows that he was joking. But how do you actually prove someone's intentions? It's not like, you can put some, computer chip in his brain and flip through and see, well, did he really mean it? So I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, and I'm not an attorney, I'm a military intelligence analyst, so I look at it from the analytic standpoint, and what we call, our analysis we can make, with low, medium, and high confidence. So I'm assessing with moderate confidence that it potentially will be dismissed, simply because it is so hard to prove. But on the other hand, I appreciate the fact that this was done because hopefully this will have a deterrent effect on would-be, copycats. We just simply cannot afford another assassination attempt on President Trump. He already escaped by this much. It's an act of God, effectively, that he was not, harmed. So we cannot afford that. So anybody who would even think of something like that should really pay attention, because what Trump wanted to do, in my assessment, is really make, if it's not going to stick, at least it made Comey's life miserable from the financial standpoint and other standpoints in order to achieve that, in my view, deterrent effect from would-be copycats.
Right, let's see what happens on that front. But I have a clip here of FBI Director Kash Patel talking about the agency's burn bag room of sensitive documents, and this is related to Russiagate. So let's just take a quick listen to this clip.
Explain a burn bag.
It's basically a large paper bag that you use to destroy and literally shred and burn classified information. So we not only found burn bags in a room that was locked away in FBI headquarters.
And they weren't burned.
They weren't burned, but the room was also off the map. It wasn't on our blueprint. And nobody had access to it.
So, Rebecca, what questions does this raise for you about the investigation? What's your reaction? The implication potentially is that certain information could have been hidden or nearly destroyed in these burn bags.
Absolutely. Well, it raises the question, first and foremost, what is the intent of hiding these burn bags? Because these burn bags are supposed to be cleared out at least, maximum every week, right? What is a burn bag? It sits like it's a bag about this tall, like a regular paper, shopping bags, except it has red stripes all over. And as you sit, at your desk and you do your work, some information that you don't need, you don't just go out and throw it in the trash. You put it in the burn bag, and at the end of the day, or at the end of the week, depending on how much you have, they take it out and they actually physically burn it, destroy it, right? So the fact that several of these bags were hidden in a room that nobody could access tells you, right? And yes, there are certain rooms like that where we have information that even anybody who has a top secret clearance can't even reach that particular room, because you have to be read in a specific, highly compartmented programs, and where there's no access even to this top secret networks, where even the cleaning crew is actually not allowed, right? So these are the rooms where we have certain information. The fact that they hid that information indicates to me, A, they didn't want this to be uncovered, and B, they wanted to potentially use it, whatever that was there, in the future. So either way, it sounds improper and suspicious.
Okay, so earlier when talking about Russiagate and Crossfire Hurricane, you used the word hoax. I want to ask you about your comments about media responsibility throughout that whole thing. Many say that mainstream media outlets were irresponsible, amplifying unverified claims. What is your view on that?
So this is a tough one. This is a tough question, right? Because the media landscape in the United States has changed, right? Media is no longer in the business of delivering news to the American people. It seems to me in the business for the past several years of shaping public opinion, right? And driving clicks, because the business model has proven not viable, right? So everybody is right now, previously, right? A lot of the media outlets are going out of business, especially print, right? So everybody's after clicks right now, monitoring. I'm certain right now they're monitoring how many people are tuning in or tuning out, right? So those clicks. So I don't necessarily blame the media for trying to sensationalize stuff, although I don't agree with it. They shouldn't be doing it. But media is not the one that has the responsibility to whether to put out certain news or to squash certain news, right? But who has responsibility? James Comey, who apparently authorized certain people within the FBI to serve as anonymous sources, leaking stories to the media that were unfavorable to President Trump, and in some cases, blatant lies, right? Those are the people who have responsibility because A, they shouldn't be divulging classified information, and it tells you that the information that they concocted, specifically that Steele dossier, was not even classified because it was orchestrated. Any competent and honest intelligence officer who has read that Steele dossier, which I have read, it's like, I was laughing, like it's for children, like it's very, very clear that it's absolutely a bunch of lies. And so yes, media did intentionally, because media is very biased, like in general, right? I'm not obviously talking about this outlet, but most media are biased, either, pro-left or pro-right. Most media is biased against President Trump and deliberately concocted like certain information that shouldn't be done. But the primary responsibility I place on officials like Comey, who feed, and that's exactly what happened. They fed information to the outlets. And I know, as a former intelligence officer, there are certain journalists that are in the Rolodex at the CIA. When we want some information get out, not even like nothing like completely fishy, but sometimes we want our adversaries to get certain information. We do it in those cases, but unfortunately, certain officials weaponize those intelligence processes against President Trump. So from that standpoint, media has done a bad job that had a very negative effect on the cohesion of American society. That is very, very damaging.
Right. Okay, so just a couple more questions here before we wrap up. I wanted to talk a bit more about your book and the title of the book specifically, because it's called Russia's Secret Plan to Defeat America. Very eye-opening title. What is Russia's plan?
Okay, so Russia has been developing a plan for a couple of decades to, the word I use is defeat. Defeat necessarily does not mean destroy kinetically. But what defeat means is neutralize in the event if the United States presents an existential threat to Russia. What does it mean, right? This is basically a deterrence plan. It is created in response to the Bush administration policy. It started with Bush in 2005. It used to be top secret, but it was declassified years later. But the plan was to democratize former Soviet states. Ukraine, Georgia, Kazakhstan, a lot, the former Soviet states that used to be part of the Soviet Union. And after especially NATO accepted the Baltics, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia into NATO, and then there were attempts taken to bring Ukraine into NATO and others. That's when Russians developed that plan. They have not acted on this plan in coordination to actually launch an unprovoked strike on the United States, and they would never do that, a bolt out of the blue sky. That will not happen. But when it comes to Ukraine, the reason why President Trump has not been able to achieve the peace plan in Ukraine, and the reason why NATO has not deployed forces into the theater in the battlefield in Ukraine, unlike in so many other countries, we place forces, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, Kosovo, we've done all that, right? Why haven't we done it with Russia? Because exactly of this plan. And I personally briefed the White House under President Obama. I briefed multiple commanders 4-star generals, European Command, Northern Command, Strategic Command that guards our nuclear weapons, at the highly classified level, right, at the top secret level, on what that plan was. A deterrent plan not to unprovoked attack the United States during the Obama administration. But Obama wanted to be friends with Putin. He did not want to listen. They would just tell us, me and, I was part of the top 3 intel analysts on Russia in the entire community. Obama's political appointees would tell us, well, why are you telling us about a Russia threat? We're not going to war with Russia. And we would tell them, well, actually, Russia thinks that you are going to war. And at that point, there was no Ukraine war just yet. And I briefed NATO just in September 2013, just months prior to Russia's invasion of Crimea. And I described at the classified level what I described here at the unclassified level. But Obama didn't want to do anything about it. He wanted to be friends with Putin. And remember how he told Dmitry Medvedev, over the open mic that I will have more flexibility. Remember all that? I will have more flexibility. Tell Vladimir I will have more flexibility. And he was planning to remove certain missile defense assets from Europe. So after, when all of this Ukraine thing happened, it all went according to this playbook. And when Obama did not want to listen to anything, and I then wrote at the unclassified level this particular book where I go in depth about this particular doctrinal measure, election interference. It's part of the Russian, what they call active measures. And I discuss in a lot of detail that intelligence community assessment that we just discussed about what Comey, Brennan, and Clapper, the disservice that they have done for the American people, basically doing Putin's work. Putin did want to intervene in the election, but not to elect Trump, but to create chaos. This is a standard Russian playbook. It's called create controlled instability. It's part of the doctrine, it's doctrinal stuff. But what the team did that Comey, Clapper, and Brennan assembled for that ICA, they fraudulently omitted the fact that Putin did not want to elect Trump. If anything, he wanted Hillary Clinton. But they did want to create chaos. And so Comey and his conspirators basically were bidding Putin's work because the country was torn apart. Remember, with all the impeachments and and him being indicted with the mugshot and all that. The Russians were just loving all that. Why was it done? Because of Comey. Not because of the Russians. Comey is the one, and Clapper and Brennan, they orchestrated all of that to really subvert the country, really subvert the American democracy.
Well, I have to say, Rebecca, very good conversation today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much.
Likewise, it's been a pleasure, Don, and hope to talk to you soon again.
Yeah, likewise. All right, we're going to take a quick break now, but we'll be back with more. From Tennessee to New York, redistricting battles are heating up after a new Supreme Court move that could reshape congressional maps. Arlene Richards breaks it down. Stay with us.
A performance that truly matters for each and every one of us. This is what you've been waiting for. See it at least once in your lifetime. Shen Yun. Get tickets now at shenyun.com.
You may be able to save a lot of money, maybe hundreds of dollars a year. Just call the number on your screen and speak with a licensed insurance agent.
Yes, it is possible for seniors to save on car insurance. You could lower your premiums by hundreds of dollars a year.
As a responsible driver, you always check your gauges, right? And you check for other cars and pedestrians. You check your oil, and you check your mirrors,
Well, now is the time to check on your auto insurance rates. You need to make sure that you're not paying more than you need to. Call the number on your screen right now.
1-800-952-5196. 1-800-952-5196.
The 8th NTD International Piano Competition welcomes distinguished pianists from around the world, celebrating the depth, discipline, and expressive power of the Baroque, classical, and romantic repertoire. September 1st through the 5th, 2026, New York City. Apply at piano.ntdtv.com, honoring the timeless tradition of the piano.
Voters are heading to the polls today in Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan with key primary races and one closely watched special election underway. Ohio is holding elections for governor, Congress, and other offices. For governor, the Republican candidates are Vivek Ramaswamy and automotive entrepreneur Casey Puch. Democrats are led by former health director Amy Acton. Indiana is seeing competitive congressional primaries. The races are drawing attention after state Senate Republicans declined mid-decade redistricting despite calls from President Trump. In Michigan, a special state Senate election could shift the balance of power, with Democrats holding a narrow majority. The outcome could determine whether Republicans gain enough seats to force a tie and block legislation in the chamber. Vice President J.D. Vance is visiting Des Moines today in his first trip to the state since taking office, and an early test of support among key Republican voters. Vance is campaigning with Congressman Zach Nunn, who faces a competitive race in the upcoming midterms. The visit comes as Iowa prepares to play its traditional early role in the 2028 presidential race. Vance is seen as a potential contender, though he has not announced a run. The vice president will also visit Cincinnati, Ohio to vote, and Oklahoma City, Oklahoma to hold a fundraiser for the RNC. Redistricting battles are picking up steam across the country in Tennessee and New York as well, and Alabama. They're taking action following the Supreme Court's recent Louisiana ruling that limits race-based districts. Meanwhile, the High Court in yesterday's ruling allowing the decision to take effect immediately. NTD's Arlen Richards has the details.
Redistricting fights are ramping up nationwide, playing out in state houses and meeting rooms after the Supreme Court's ruling last week that limits how race can be used to draw electoral maps. And on Monday, the court made clear the decision takes effect immediately.
Now in session.
In Tennessee, lawmakers meeting on Tuesday for a special session to redraw the state's congressional map. They're looking to add a Republican-leaning district. In Alabama, legislators are meeting in a special session considering proposals that could trigger new primary elections if federal courts allow the state to toss out court-ordered maps.
78 members have answered roll. Quorum is present. The House is ready to transact business.
That effort could wipe out one of the state's 2 congressional districts currently held by Democrats. And in New York, House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries launching a new redistricting initiative Monday called the New York Democracy Project. He's calling on the state to redraw its congressional lines in response to the Supreme Court decision. Governor Kathy Hochul echoing that message Tuesday after meeting with a committee ranking member, Joe Morelli.
I know our legislature is prepared to work together with all of us in a concerted effort to fight back with everything we have.
Meanwhile, the Supreme Court's decision could continue its impact nationwide as states weigh next steps and legal challenges move forward. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro is calling out a judge for his apology to the man accused of trying to assassinate President Trump. The suspect in the assassination attempt is expected to receive a final decision on the terms of his detention today. Prosecutors say Cole Allen shot a Secret Service agent in an attempted attack during the White House Correspondents' Dinner. A judge yesterday raised concerns over Allen's treatment in custody, saying his conditions must be reassessed, and also apologized to the suspect. Allen was initially placed on suicide watch and is being held in a so-called safe cell. Officials say the measures relate to suicide risk protocols following his arrest. His charges include attempted assassination of the president, discharging a firearm during a crime of violence, and illegally transporting guns and ammunition across state lines. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro criticized the judge on social media over his apology, saying he, quote, believes a defendant armed to the teeth and attempting to assassinate the president is entitled to preferential treatment in his confinement compared to every other defendant. Republicans in Congress are planning to fund $1 billion for security updates at the proposed White House ballroom. The money is part of a larger bill to pay for ICE and Border Patrol. Senate Republicans released the bill late yesterday. It would designate the money for the U.S. Secret Service for security adjustments and upgrades related to President Trump's ballroom project. The bill says the money would support above-ground and below-ground security features. It also specifies that the money may not be used for non-security elements. The White House has said that the East Wing project would be heavily fortified, including bomb shelters, military installations, and a medical facility underneath the ballroom. The White House says private money would pay for the construction, but public money would be used for security measures. Democrats said they will oppose any efforts to pay for the ballroom. The proposed funding comes after a man was charged with trying to assassinate Trump at the White House Correspondents Association dinner last week. The Justice Department is suing Denver over what it argues is an unconstitutional weapons bias. The complaint centers around a city ordinance banning so-called assault weapons. Denver's law includes a prohibition on AR-15s, the most popular rifle in the United States. The DOJ argues the ordinance infringes on the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche weighed in, saying, quote, the Constitution is not a suggestion and the Second Amendment is not a second-class right. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon of the DOJ Civil Rights Division said her office would defend the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding Americans. Dillon added that American citizens should be able to exercise those rights, regardless of where they live. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is suing the New York Times over alleged discrimination in its employment practices. The agency says the newspaper allegedly passed over a qualified white male employee for a promotion because of his race and gender. In a federal lawsuit filed in Manhattan today, the agency accuses the Times of illegal discrimination dating back to at least October 2024. The lawsuit cites the paper's annual diversity and inclusion reports, which tracked staff demographics by race and sex and set explicit goals to increase the number of Black, Latino, and female employees. The complaint also references internal Slack communications between newsroom executives. The New York Times called the lawsuit meritless. The White House says President Trump's drug pricing policy could save the economy billions of dollars. This is according to their economic report today. The Trump administration has struck deals with 17 leading drug makers under the Most Favored Nation framework. The White House Council of Economic Advisors estimating today that the deals could save the U.S. $529 billion in the next 10 years across all markets. They say this would include saving federal and state governments a combined $64 billion on Medicaid. The report also says GLP-1 weight loss drug users without insurance are expected to save $3,000 per year, and couples undergoing in vitro fertilization can save $6,000 a year. According to the latest government data, Americans spent $467 billion on prescription drugs in 2024. The Trump administration says it's working to reach more agreements with drug makers and also asking Congress to codify these deals into law. A New York lawmaker is turning his focus to hidden fees in food and grocery delivery apps, looking to ban surveillance pricing. NTD's Sean Marshall has more.
U.S. Representative Dan Goldman of New York believes consumers should know all about the hidden cost up front before checkout when using food and grocery delivery apps. He's introduced the Promoting Real-Time Information on Cost Expenditure Bill, or PRICE Act legislation.
I think the PRICE Act does a few good things, which is that it requires that I don't need to go to the final step to see what the full price is, right? And this is something similar in other industries. Concert tickets is one that comes to mind, right? There's been a lot of outcry about why is my concert ticket like double the price by the time I get to the point where I have to put my credit card in. I think where this PRICE Act really falls short is that it doesn't cap the fees. So if delivery apps are still able to charge you double the price or triple the price and still able to add on like 5 or 6 fees in the line item pricing, then that doesn't really help consumers or Americans who are looking to use these apps. So I think really there should be a cap on the number of fees or on the percentage of fees that these platforms are allowed to charge you.
Representative Goldman wants to ban these apps from engaging in exploitative surveillance pricing. His bill says these practices harm consumers by making it virtually impossible to comparison shop and by hindering competitive markets.
Surveillance pricing is something that Americans should definitely be concerned about for a variety of reasons. It ultimately really gives the platforms a lot of power because, like you mentioned, they have access to where you are, what you buy. They can put you into a demographic box if they think that you can pay more, not just because you have more purchasing power, but because you may be in a situation where you're categorized as a desperate user.
Hidden fees don't only affect the consumers, they can also have effects on the food businesses in the apps.
So there can be a distrust between that where users feel like restaurants are upcharging the food pricing, and sometimes the pricing upcharge is, double the price. It can be 30% higher, 50% higher. Sometimes it's a pretty substantial increase. Ultimately, the restaurants are the ones who are often still losing out. Restaurants are still barely meeting their margin requirements, and restaurants are already operating on quite thin margins in the United States.
The Price Act requires delivery apps to show consumers the total running all-in price of their order as items are added to their carts. It also requires that the apps include, prior to checkout, a clear breakdown that prominently displays the ongoing total purchase amount, along with an explanation of each fee. The bill additionally bans food delivery apps from engaging in surveillance pricing, an exploitative pricing strategy where companies use personal data, including location, browsing history, device type, and shopping habits, to set individualized prices. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Artificial intelligence firm Anthropic announced it's launching new tools that can speed up a host of tasks for banks, insurers, and other segments of the financial services industry. The startup launched 10 financially focused agents or AI programs that can perform tasks with limited human intervention. Anthropic says these include agents that can build a pitch book, audit statements, and draft credit memos. The company also announcing new data sources that its so-called Claude AI can access to do financial work. Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei also has a stark forecast for software disruption. Amodei says its Claude Mythos model has probably found tens of thousands of vulnerabilities across industries so far, and that there should be legislation or rules to govern the release of powerful AI models. Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke of the almost 23,000 civilians from 87 different countries who are trapped in the Gulf that Project Freedom aims to rescue. More after this break. Stay tuned.
Introducing the Quest-Wise Soothing Herbal Eye Patches. It comes with 30 pairs and can be used to help combat tired and strained eyes. The natural herbal formula provides a cooling, minty, and refreshing effect that stimulates natural tears and awakens your tired eyes. Placing the eye patches around your eyes helps to reduce dryness and massages acupuncture points. They can be worn while reading, studying, using electronics, and provide hours of long-lasting relief.
So at the age of 5, I was sexually molested. I had my first child at the age of 15 and became homeless at the age of 16. The scariest part about not having a place to live was having a child and not having a place to live and not knowing where our meal was going to come from and where we're going to sleep. To be homeless as a teen, I didn't ask for that.
No young person should ever have to worry about having a safe place to sleep at night, or a warm meal to eat, or whether anyone cares about them. 1 in 10 young adults will experience a form of homelessness this year, and that's unacceptable. But the good news is there is an organization making a big difference, Covenant House.
Call or go online now. For a gift of only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can provide hot meals, safe shelter, medical care, and love to more than 2,000 young people who sleep at a Covenant House every night.
For over 50 years, Covenant House has been helping youth in crisis.
It was pretty tough But Covenant House really helped me and really helped mold me into the woman I am today.
Call or go online right now to safeplacetosleep.org with your gift of just $19 a month. With your monthly donation, you'll receive this soft, comforting blanket as a reminder of the warmth and safety your gift will provide a young person tonight.
I have no words to express how Covenant House changed my life. They gave me the love that I needed. They just really genuinely just wanted to help me succeed, and I'm succeeding.
Your $19 monthly gift is urgently needed to reach other young people who are facing unimaginable situations. Call or go online to safeplacetosleep.org.
Your support makes the work of Covenant House possible. Thank you for caring.
President Trump says Iran wants to make a deal but is playing games. It comes as the Pentagon says a ceasefire is not over despite fresh Iranian attacks. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has the latest.
The Trump administration is now saying that a ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran is still in place, and it comes after the U.S. and Iran on Monday traded fire in the Strait of Hormuz after the U.S. started to help guide commercial vessels through that key waterway by really creating a defense umbrella, as the Pentagon calls it, to help these ships that have been stuck there get out of it. Meanwhile, Central Command announcing that Iran has attacked U.S. commercial as well as Navy vessels using cruise missiles, and the U.S. in response destroyed 8 Iranian fast boats. And President Trump this afternoon saying that Iran knows what to do and what not to do, and also saying that the latest attacks by Iran small boats shows that their military capabilities have been largely diminished. Watch.
What do they need to do to violate the ceasefire?
Well, you'll find out, because I'll let you know. You know, they fired them in little boats with pea shooters. You know, the pea shooters, little boat with little, you know why? Because they don't have any boats anymore. The Navy is comprised of, they call them little boats, fast right? Boats or little boats. And they're fast, yeah. They're so fast that they had 8 of them and they're all gone.
UAE says that it's now under attack from Iran on a second day in a row, and that hasn't happened since the ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran started about a month ago. Now it's drawing condemnation from Gulf countries in that region. Pentagon also announcing that since a ceasefire started, Iran has fired at commercial vessels at least 9 times, seized 2 container ships, and also attacked U.S. forces more than 10 times. That said, all of them are considered below the threshold that would require the commander-in-chief to declare the ceasefire over and resume major attacks. General Kane this morning calling them low-level kinetics. The president this afternoon saying that Iran does still want to make a deal but is playing games by acting differently in public versus in private. He also continues to call this conflict a skirmish by the U.S. Watch.
We hit an all-time high stock market today, despite that we're in a little skirmish military. I call it a skirmish because Iran has no chance. They never did. They know it. They express it to me when I talk to them. Then they get on television. They say how well they're doing. And they have no Navy, totally wiped out. They have no Air Force, totally wiped out.
And of course, the president has been emphasizing that this conflict is very much needed to make sure that Iran, who he called a lunatic regime, does not have a nuclear weapon. He has been saying how close Iran really got to almost getting a nuclear weapon given its enriched uranium and its nuclear ambitions. And he said that in order to prevent that from happening and to make sure that the whole region, if not the whole world, stays safe, he had to make the call to go in and make sure that Iran's nuclear ambitions are thwarted. Meanwhile, today, the president is saying that if Iran still wouldn't make a deal, they won't be successful, and quote, it will go very quickly and methodically. So again, the president refreshing his threats for major strikes if a deal is still not accomplished. On the economy, though, President Trump says Iran is facing skyrocketing inflation, and he does want Iran's financial system to fail in order for the U.S. to win. This afternoon, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will be briefing reporters at the White House, while Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, is on maternity leave, and that will be the secretary's first major formal press briefing in months. Back to you.
The U.S. continues to project freedom to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the Iranian regime attacking its neighbors and even U.S. forces in some cases. NTD's international correspondent, Arian Pastar, has the latest on the reopening of the crucial waterway.
And the regime led by the IRGC is effectively attempting to hold the entire global economy hostage.
General Dan Kane on Tuesday, giving details about American efforts to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He showed a map displaying Iranian attacks in the region.
Since the ceasefire was announced, Iran has fired at commercial vessels 9 times and seized 2 container ships. And they've attacked U.S. forces more than 10 times, all below the threshold of restarting major combat operations at this point.
He added that because of Iran's attacks, there are currently over 20,000 mariners on more than 1,500 commercial vessels trapped in the Persian Gulf. And the Islamic regime continues attacking its neighbors like Oman and the UAE. Kane says Iran launches cruise missiles, drones, and even small boats with machine guns, which the U.S. defends against.
On the surface, guided missile destroyers and other warships are detecting and defeating Iranian threats. This includes fast boats and one-way attack drones. In the air, more than 100 fighters, attack aircraft, and other manned and unmanned aircraft, synchronized by the 82nd Airborne Division, are in the air 24 hours a day, providing defensive overwatch.
He added that in total, 15,000 American service members are currently working in the region. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke of the almost 23,000 civilians from 87 different countries who are trapped in the Gulf that Project Freedom aims to rescue. Rubio briefed members of the media in place of White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, who is on maternity leave.
They're isolated, they're starving, they're vulnerable, and at least 10 sailors have already died as a result of the civilian sailors. So already many nations privately and some publicly have asked the United States to help free their ships and to restore freedom of navigation in the Straits of Hormuz and this critical artery of global trade. And so President Trump, as he always does, stepped up and answered the calls.
Rubio stressed that Project Freedom is a defensive operation, saying that means, quote, there's no shooting unless we're shot at first. He said the Iranian fast boats that were taken out were a threat to U.S. forces and that any drones or missiles would be shut down.
Our preference is for these straits to be opened to the way they're supposed to be opened, back to the way it was. Anyone can use it, no mines in the water, nobody paying tolls. That's what we have to get back to, and that's the goal here. Every day the conflict continues, however, our leverage on Iran will continue to increase, and their position will continue to weaken, especially as the blockade really begins to bite in conjunction with the sanctions.
Rubio noted the blockade is costing Iran as much as $500 million a day in lost revenue. He said 90% of total Iranian trade has been halted, causing permanent damage to Iran's oil infrastructure, as wells are forced to shut. President Trump reinstates the presidential fitness test, bringing back a decades-old school tradition aimed at boosting youth health and competition. Stay tuned for more news after this break.
This is how I keep my joints happy.
Omega XL is a powerful natural supplement backed by 40 years of clinical research. Take control of your pain, like Cynthia Bailey.
My knees in particular started giving me pain issues all the way back to my modeling days, from just running through airports, photo shoots. After taking Omega XL, I really started to notice how less stiff I was, especially my knees and my hip. Has Omega XL changed my life? Yes. I barely notice my joint pain anymore. Now I'm like literally sprinting through the airports. My secret is Omega XL.
Pick up the phone and call now to get this exclusive TV offer. Buy one Omega XL and we'll send you a second bottle absolutely free. You'll also get a free bottle of Vitamin XL D3. Buy one, get two free. A total value of over $115, all for just $49.95. You save more than 55% and shipping is free. Backed by a money-back guarantee and is not available in stores. Operators are standing by, so call now.
Shenyun Creations, the streaming platform from Shenyun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore shenyuncreations.com.
Sweetie, are you ready to go?
In a sec!
Do you think Granny will like this?
Of course she will.
Let's go.
Hello! Hi! So good to see you. Come in, come in, come in.
Mom, thank you for everything.
Oh my goodness. Wow, that is so beautiful. I love the color. Oh my gosh, the leather. Thank you so much.
Mom, thank you for everything.
Oh, wow.
Like matches.
It's adorable.
Have you heard what's happening at Mathis Home? Our spring style event is going on now, with hundreds of options for your new dining room. This 52-inch table is a great deal. It's just $4.99 in your choice of finishes. Mix and match chairs to complete the look that's just right for you. You can also get it with a marble top or in a larger size for extra seating. We have your style in stock now with fast, free delivery. Get your new dining room and save at your furniture superstore, Mathis Home.
President Trump's trip to China looks to still be on track. Trump says he plans to bring up Jimmy Lai during his meeting with Xi Jinping. Lai is the founder of pro-democracy media company Apple Daily and was imprisoned by the Chinese regime in 2020.
President Trump says he will bring up China's political prisoner, Jimmy Lai, when he meets with Chinese leader Xi Jinping in China.
There's a little bitterness, I would say, with him and Jimmy Lai. You know, he was Hong Kong was not as easy, but I will be bringing.
Lai is the founder of the former media outlet Apple Daily. Apple Daily operated in Hong Kong, where Lai lived, and was often critical of the Chinese regime. Lai was arrested in 2020 after the CCP violated its agreement with the UK and took back control of Hong Kong. Lai was sentenced to 20 years in prison in 2025. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is urging China to persuade Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz to international shipping.
Let's see them step up with some diplomacy and get the Iranians to open the strait.
Bessent went on to say that China is a large financer of Iran.
Iran is the largest state sponsor of terrorism, and China has been buying 90% of their energy, so they are funding the largest state sponsor of terrorism.
Despite an earlier postponement, it appears that the president's trip to China to meet with Xi is going to happen.
And I'm going to go see President Xi in 2 weeks. I look forward to that. It'll be a very important trip.
This will be Trump's first visit to China as president since 2017 and Trump's second in person with Xi during his second term. Jason Blair, NTD News.
President Trump signed a proclamation today reinstating the Presidential Fitness Test Award. The president hosted children and professional athletes in the Oval Office.
From the late 1950s until 2013, grade schoolers across the country competed against each other in the presidential fitness test, but others. And then we had the Obama administration. Wonderful, wonderful person, Barack Hussein Obama. Have you heard of him? We had the Obama administration, which phased out this wonderful tradition of physical fitness. Thank you, Barack, very much. Great job. And we're bringing it back. We're bringing it back. My administration's working very hard to defend America's cherished athletic traditions and pass our values of excellence and competitiveness to the next generation.
Thank you to the President of the United States for helping reestablish this presidential fitness test. It's been something that we've been looking forward to doing for a long time, since 2013. I remember going through the presidential fitness test as a kid and getting that award, and it was quite an honor. So being up here and a part of that is quite instrumental and going to be amazing for our nation's future. Reestablishing the golden standard of the presidential fitness test has been a huge deal for me. Is that these kids now are going to have a healthy future. That's really an important thing for us to note here. Is that we want to make sure our kids have the best opportunity to succeed in life. And not only from their mind, but their health and their well-being, their physical fitness is a huge priority to helping them become better human beings in general for our nation.
President Dwight Eisenhower created the President's Council on Youth Fitness in 1956 amid a decline in youth fitness in the United States. In 1966, President Lyndon Johnson established the Presidential Fitness Test granted to youth athletes who demonstrate exceptional achievement. The restored focus on physical fitness comes amid the Trump administration's Make America Healthy Again agenda led by Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. President Trump revealed a new name and logo for what is now called the National Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. The redesign comes following a social media post that suggested changing the name of the federal agency so that ICE agents became NICE agents. The president responded to the post saying, "Great idea, do it." And thank you for watching NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. We're taking a short break. We'll be back with more news, so stay with us. And remember, NTD Evening News is at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific.